across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 6 and I am here for your delectation, ladies and gentlemen. It is the home of common sense. It is the one place the nation comes to talk, and we have got plenty to talk about this morning. As if you weren't filled with absolute and utter condemnation of this Labour government yesterday when they had to fire not one but two MPs because of the fact that they'd taken part in some rather unsavoury WhatsApp conversations, right? We've now got page one of The Sun where a new minister has been appointed, and this is in the Secretary of State for Health's department, so she's going to be working for Wes Streeting. When they announced that Ashley Dalton was going to be made the new Minister for Health, I thought, I've never heard of him. I didn't realise it was actually a woman. When I've looked at the picture, I'm not even sure it is a woman. It looks like some kind of Eddie Izzard lookalike. I'm not sure if it's a woman or not, but apparently Ashley says that women can have a willy, so that's good news, isn't it? Because she's working in the NHS. She also says that if you wish to identify as a llama, you can do that as well. So I'm looking forward to the next time I go into a hospital. Obviously, you're under pressure, you're feeling bad, you're not feeling very well. And when you say to the people who are asking you if you might be pregnant, despite the fact that you're a male aged about 60-odd, like I am, you can say, no, not only am I not pregnant, but I'm actually a llama. Look at me. I mean, you know, you can see I've got a little bit of hair on the top of my head, like a llama. My teeth are kind of similar. And I haven't got 4 legs, I've only got 2. But at the end of the day, I identify as a llama, so I wish you to treat me as a llama. I mean, Christ almighty. What is going on? This is the government of today, right? We're on the 50th anniversary of Margaret Thatcher taking over as the leader of the Conservative Party, which we'll also be talking about. And this is what we have to put up with? I mean, is somebody winding Keir Starmer up, going, yeah, this is a good idea, give the job to this woman, you know, because she thinks it's OK for a woman to have a cock, and it's also OK for a llama to enter Parliament. I mean, for God's sake. Peter Blacksley's here with me. Very good morning to you, Peter. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to start the show off on such a low note, and I'm sorry for what I said earlier about the C word, but I can't get away from it. It's woolly thinking, is what they said on the front page of the Sun, and it is not just woolly thinking. It is absolutely mad. Yesterday, we had the crazy story of the Albanian criminal who couldn't be deported because his son doesn't like chicken nuggets unless they're made in Hounslow. Right? We've now got today a Pakistani father who's been jailed for child sex offences, i.e. he's a Pakistani pedo, I'm afraid. He's escaped deportation because it would be, in the words of the judges, unduly harsh on his children.
Oh, yes, this man who tried to lure 3 children, OK, to not one offence, but 3 prepubescent children.
Unbelievable.
For sex. I won't go into any more graphic details than that at this time of the day. Can you believe it? OK, the case is ongoing because the first panel said, oh, yes, it would be a massive breach of his human rights if he was to be extradited. And you know what? His daft wife, in his defence, said, well, actually, you know, it is understandable because I wasn't having sex with him because I'd had COVID. What an utter load of nonsense.
Deary me. Oh, my
Get him
God.
on a plane, get him in cuffs, get him in shackles, if need be, and fly him back to Pakistan now.
Yeah. Pronto, I think is the word we used to use. If you know how to get in touch with us, that's great. But if you don't know how to get in touch with us, have a listen to this.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. Great show.
Morning, Mike. John in Glasgow.
Sue from Chelmsford here.
Hi, Mike. Tim from North Devon. Please don't deport me, because I like my chicken nuggets from UK. They're finger-licking good.
Ah, dearie me. Anyway, here we are. It's Tuesday morning, as I say, 7 minutes past 6. We've got plenty to go at. Peter Blexley's here. I've missed you, Peter. You've been away, haven't you?
Very kind of you to say that, Mike. Yeah, I had a 2-week holiday with my wife in Thailand, which was lovely.
I always say to people when they've been away who've come back, why have you returned to this nation of ours, which appears to be rotting from the inside and deteriorating faster than a block of cheese outside of a fridge?
the lure of talk is inescapable. I just have to come back to get up and crack the dawn and sit here at 6 o'clock in the morning and go through the papers with you.
I can see the lure is brilliant. I mean, we've got to talk about the state of play here. So apparently Donald Trump's going to grant Keir Starmer an audience at some point later this month. And believe it or not, he was invited to an AI conference in Paris this week, and he's not going. He's obviously worked out that maybe if I leave the country, bad things will happen, and maybe somebody will take over while I'm away. I likened it last week to those West African sort of dictators back in the 70s, they never left home because every time they did, there was a military coup. And they couldn't get back into the presidential palace. It's a bit like that, isn't it? It feels like that.
I think this scheduled meeting, which apparently could come as early as next week when there's a parliamentary recess, would be very interesting.
Oh, it's time to have another holiday. Oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, another pay rise for the MPs is on the way.
Yeah, another $2,000 or
something like that, taking up to about $94,000 a year.
Yeah, after that 5.5% that they got last year. They're not doing too badly, are they?
Plus expenses.
Yeah, bearing in mind that some of them are so utterly talentless that they wouldn't get $90,000 anywhere else whatsoever.
No. Unless they got jobs as a train driver. I'm not even sure that this woman, Ashley Dalton, who says that she doesn't believe in gendered toilets, has argued in the past that, according to The Sun, women can have a willy. She also wants to describe Brexit voters as short-sighted and stupid.
I mean, she's got a pay rise, hasn't she, now? Because she's been dragged into a ministerial role. Yeah. You can imagine she's skipping through the corridors of power, counting her pay rise, however much that is. Yeah. But her salary will most definitely have gone up. And she thinks it's perfectly okay to identify as a llama.
A llama?
I mean, really, it's beyond the comprehension of any reasonable man and woman, I would suggest.
Yes.
That a government minister thinks you can just call yourself and identify as a llama, or I guess a sheep, probably, or a cow, or a dog, or a cat.
Duck-billed platypus.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is that all of these people know that they're talking absolute and utter cobblers, right? But they just pretend, for the sake of the voters, for the sake of the left-wing kind of, cognoscenti, that they believe all this absolute rubbish. I'm trying hard not to say the word, although Isabel Oakeshott did say it on Talk yesterday morning, so maybe I can get away with it. Is that, they know that it's not true, but they keep saying it because they think it will appease those on the sort of trans-left side of politics who think you can be basically anything you want to be.
You see, we know that politics has many, many snakes and rats within it.
True.
So you'd think she might say, you can identify as such, because she might well be surrounded by many
vermin.
of them. Yeah, exactly.
I identify as vermin. Well, I would go with that.
But a llama?
No.
I'm not having it. Really?
I mean, I was listening to Jeremy Carl's show yesterday, and he was talking about alpacas and llamas, the difference between the two. Nobody knows what the difference is, but we know when we see it, right? But, I mean, the idea that this woman is now going to be the health minister, replacing a guy who thought it was a great idea to suggest that pensioners should die off, and that would be a good thing.
Yeah, because one had the temerity to write to him about bin collections, yes. What a delightful man he clearly is.
Yes.
Not.
And she also says, Ms Dalton, when she was telling people that people could seriously self-identify as llamas, she said this: yes, they can, and that they should be treated with dignity and respect.
But you see, this is another example.
Should you not get the men in the white coats to put them in a straitjacket?
Yes, quite possibly, if only there was room in psychiatric hospitals these days.
Which, of course, there isn't.
No. But this is another example of the lunatic left wokerati, DEI kind of nonsense, getting another position of power within the health service. We know how much the health service wastes on ridiculous kind of nonsense things. In fact, there was a story today about, I think it was Guy's Hospital's charitable trust, wasting £5,000 on a rebranding of, guess what? A pride badge.
Oh, great.
Just frittering money needlessly. And, of course, when we have another member of this loony left in a position of power, is this minister going to get a grip on wastage? I would suggest Probably not.
No, I think so. We've also been treated this morning to various pictures of King Charles meeting Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner yesterday. He decided to take Angela Rayner with him to go and visit a King Charles sort of outpost somewhere in Britain, where he's decided to build this community, a bit like Poundbury, which is now multi-million Poundbury, I presume it's called. It's quite funny, a picture on the front of the Telegraph, The King and I, in which it shows basically King Charles looking rather sort of, I would say, interestingly at the back of Angela Rayner's coat. I don't know what he's looking at, but here she is. She turns up in this green coat, which looks like something out of The Grinch That Stole Christmas, and a pair of shoes that would not have looked out of place on members of Shawaddy-Waddy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and she starts waving to this crowd of small children who have got their
They're all
Union
waving
flags.
Union Jacks, yeah.
The kids are there to see the king. They don't even know who Angela Rayner is, and yet she's waving at them as if she's trying to, as if the kids think she's Taylor Swift or something.
Hopeless Keir is also waving at them. If you see him, he's kind of going, hello, you know, and it is really quite weird, isn't it? Very unusual for the Prime Minister and the King to meet in these circumstances, I'm told.
Oh, well, there you go. Starmer and Rayner are absolutely milking it for all they can under the utter deluded thinking that the kids are waving at them. Oh, it's a joy.
Let's have a close-up of the shoes. I think if you're watching, you can see them, as opposed to actually just listening to what we're banging on about. I mean, they are definitely Shawaddy-Waddy. People were debating me last night, because I was calling them bother boots, which you'll remember from the 70s.
Oh, very
Other
much
people
so.
were calling them brothel creepers, which is what they used to wear in Shawaddy-Waddy days. I mean, does she seriously think that that is a good way to dress when you're meeting the King of not only the United Kingdom, but also of the Commonwealth?
It's enough to make you wish Lord Alley would give her a few quid and buy her a new wardrobe.
Well, you might say that. Maybe he's already paid for these. We don't know. He's gone very quiet, Lord Alley. We don't know anything about what he's doing. He's disappeared from view. We can be sure that he's still working away behind the scenes, pulling a few strings, getting a few policies sorted out. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And the coat looks as if it was made for, you know, somebody twice her size.
Yeah, well, you know, she has a fashion, shall I say, style all of her own.
She certainly does.
The Deputy Prime Minister, doesn't she?
She's sort of the Vivienne Westwood of the cabinet, isn't she?
I'm sure that people across the world are looking at her and constantly going, what brand is she wearing? Is it a famous British brand? Can I buy it?
Yeah.
You know, the Princess of Wales needs to be very careful. You know, Angela Rayner is snapping at her heels when it comes to being a style icon.
Yesterday we played a lot of clips from her appearances over the weekend on television with the BBC and various others, where she kept saying things like, I don't recognise that. When she was asked if she'd once said, you know, Keir Starmer couldn't run a bath, she said, I don't recognise that. Don't recognise that at all. When she was asked about calling Prince Andrew a nonce, which I think a lot of people would have gone, well, actually, we don't mind that, she didn't recognise that either, and she wasn't going to get into it.
Yeah. Does she recognise herself when she looks in the mirror in the morning? She might say, I don't recognise that.
No. I don't recognise those shoes. I don't know how I got them. The coat, I don't know whose coat that is. It's not mine. I don't know where I got, well, you know. But it is just bizarre, isn't it? Very, very strange. So Starmer's off to visit Trump this month, according to Daily Telegraph. Negotiations with the White House over the exact date of the visit are ongoing. My favourite scenario would be he flies all the way to Washington and Trump goes, no, I told you to come to Florida, you know. And he sort of gets to the wrong place and sits in the wrong waiting room and then gets told, no, the president's not here, mate.
I'd love to be on a fly on the wall, obviously, to see how that goes, because there is absolutely no doubt that whether you love him or you loathe him, Donald Trump
love him.
now sits across the global political landscape.
He does.
As an absolute colossus.
He really is.
And Starmer is firefighting left, right and centre because his government are behaving appallingly.
Yes.
There's no growth.
And haltingly as well. Everything they do is a problem.
Yeah, we might be sliding towards recession. Who knows? We'll see when the next set of stats come out. He is so bad at doing politics, Keir Starmer. I mean, it's so bad. Now, I'm not decrying him for having a career before entering politics. I think in some circumstances that can be a good thing. But bearing in mind how long he's been in politics, you would think that he'd have got the hang of it by now.
You would have thought so.
But he really hasn't.
No.
He's appalling at
Yeah,
politics.
but what about all these geniuses behind the scenes? You know, first it was Sue Gray. She was meant to be the cleverest woman that was ever born.
Yeah.
She was going to be the woman that was so full of integrity that was bursting out of every pore of her body.
Yeah.
She was the person charged with the first 100 days and the grid, as they like to call it, of what the Labour government was going to do. It turns out that on that grid she'd forgotten to put on day 93, I'll be getting the sack. So she did absolutely nothing, the square root of sweet FA. It turns out that she and Morgan McSweeney, as we like to call him, were basically just fighting like two cats in a sack all the way before the election and all the way after the election. And he's meant to be another genius who's clearly not a genius.
Would it be the same Sue Gray that it is alleged that Starmer tried to stifle the BBC
That would be the same.
publishing the details of her salary?
The same
That's
one.
Sue Gray, is it?
Yes, that's the same one.
Oh, yeah, because there's nothing like an open and transparent government,
No,
is there?
exactly
You know,
right.
telling the truth,
Yeah.
being honest, being upfront with all those people that
Yeah.
voted for him.
Yes. No, his first instinct is to keep everything secret, keep it
Yeah.
quiet, don't tell the public, you know, give them some other distraction that's going on. Front page of the Times today has got Starmer set to sidestep EU's tariff war with the US because yesterday Donald Trump came out and said he was going to stick a load of tariffs on anybody who was selling steel into the United States. Let's have a look.
Today, I'm simplifying our tariffs on steel and aluminum so that everyone can understand exactly what it means. It's 25% without exceptions or exemptions, and that's all countries, no matter where it comes from, all countries. If made in the United States, however, United States of America, there is no tariff, zero. So if it's made in the United States, there is no tariff. All you have to do is make it in the United States. We don't need it from another country.
It's pretty straightforward, that, isn't it? I'm against those who say we shouldn't have tariffs, it's against free trade. If you're having tariffs to protect your own country, to protect the jobs in your own country, I think it's perfectly justifiable.
He's doing what he said he was going to do, isn't he?
Absolutely right.
You cannot knock him in that regard.
But, you know, he's got some problems coming up because Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz, who's soon going to be out of a job, both of them soon going to be out of a job, have said basically that he has no justification for doing it, and they're going to go head-to-head with him, and they're going to say to him, anyone who imposes tariffs must expect counter-tariffs. I mean, you've been in a few, I'm sure, what you might call adversarial scenarios where people are walking towards you who may wish to do you harm. If you saw Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron walking towards you, you'd probably just fall about laughing, wouldn't you?
I think that's...
With menaces.
I think that's highly likely. I certainly wouldn't need to turn and have it on my dancers, would I? Even though my street fighting days are long behind
you
me.
You wouldn't be reaching for the rubber cosh, would you?
I'd still fancy my chances up against them two.
I think everybody would. I mean, the idea that they're going to intimidate Donald Trump is ridiculous. And people will
Laughable.
say, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be supporting Britain. Yeah, I am. Starmer's saying, he's going to say, look, we're outside of the EU, we're not taking part of any of that nonsense. So despite the fact he was over there crawling and creeping just last week, trying to make sure that he would have a closer relationship with the EU, suddenly Trump puts down the old tariff card and old Keir Starmer runs for the hills.
Yeah, he's going to get blown in the wind, isn't he? This is the tightrope that he's trying to walk by saying, have a closer relationship with the EU.
Right.
And we'll hear similar language where he talks about we're in a position to have a closer relationship with the US.
Yes.
Well, I think Donald Trump might just say to him, pick your side, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And pick wisely, mate, because if you pick the wrong side, i.e. the EU, you will end up getting squashed, as they say in some movies in America.
Because what Donald Trump did do, I believe, in around about 2017, after he got elected the first time, he made an exemption for what were then the existing tariffs for British steel, and I think up to a limit of 500,000 tonnes. Now, whether that's going to be completely revoked or whether there will be room for manoeuvre if Starmer allies himself closer to the US and say, well, can we have an exemption of some description? You know, is there room for manoeuvre? Donald Trump, unmistakably, is a brilliant negotiator.
Yes.
He's negotiated deals all his life.
Yeah.
And consequently, I think he has so many people running scared because he opens up with a standpoint that some people might say, well, that's ridiculous. But it's a great opening gambit.
Yeah, right.
Anybody who's ever done a deal in
Right.
business knows that you don't get what your
You
opening
know what's
gambit
also great
is.
about him is he's exposed the uselessness of the way that politicians operate, because politicians tell us all the time, oh, we can't do that, you know. I was listening to an MP last evening, talking on the news, a Labour MP, saying we've got to understand that the game has changed. You know, people are now working a lot quicker. Thanks to Donald Trump, you know, the world is moving faster than ever. You know, he's imposing tariffs, and it happens tomorrow. He's imposing, threats on the Middle East. He's imposing threats on Russia. He's basically saying, right, if you don't do this by tomorrow, we're going to take this action. And he's changing the game. And everyone's sitting around going, oh, blimey, you can't any longer just get away with saying, oh, we'll have an inquiry, or, you know, we'll look into this for a couple of years and we'll get back to you. Can't do it.
Which, of course, is very difficult for Starmer,
Yeah.
for example, and Lord Hamer, the Attorney General,
Yeah.
okay? Because these lawyers love things proceeding at a snail's pace.
There's yet
because
more-
they still get paid.
Yes.
They love to drag it out.
Exactly.
Let's have another appeal.
Right.
Let's have another tribunal. Let's take it to another court.
Yeah.
Drag everything out for as long as they possibly can, because throughout that entire needlessly long process, they get paid.
Exactly.
At every turn.
And
whereas
there's-
Donald Trump's going, boom, do it now, boom, do it now,
Yeah.
and they can't handle that
What's
kind
the
of
problem?
pace.
Exactly right. Yeah, Lord Hermer, my favourite Attorney General, Lord Harmer, as we like to call him, has been facing more calls to be fired, and this is from his own side, because he's completely and utterly anti-British. My favourite text so far this morning is from Michelle in Altrincham, who says, Mike, great show as usual, good morning. The biggest difference between llamas and alpacas is their size and the type of coat each of them has. I don't know if you need this information. Llamas grow a coarse wool coat, whereas an alpaca's hair is longer and finer. So I think if you want a jumper, you go with the alpaca. If you want a coat like Angela Rayner's, you go with a llama.
I don't want to coat
There's a
like
joke
Angela
there somewhere.
Rayner's.
I
There
can't
is.
think of what it is,
There
but I'll
is.
come up with
But
something.
please, I don't want a coat like hers.
No, absolutely not. All shoes. 24 minutes past 6. Let's get a voice note from Terry.
Hi Mike, it's Terry in Lincoln. There's a starmer who waited on the sly. He said he wouldn't fleece us, now we know it was a lie. Keir Starmer's flying to and fro. He hasn't got the message, it's time for him to go, he told us. Let the old ones lose it, let the farmers lose it, let the migrants abuse it.
Brilliant. Terry, what can I say? I salute you, sir. Very well done. This time of the morning to be that inspired. The voice notes are getting better and better. Keep them coming. 0344 499 1000. Peter Blexley's here. He's back for his travels. And quite frankly, just in time to save the country. This is Talk. Sorry.
case centred on the son's additional needs, although there was no evidence from a trained psychologist, nothing at all. There was evidence from a neighbour and a trainee psychologist. No diagnosis of special educational needs, but basically he had he had problems with socks. He had problems with types of food he would eat, including chicken nuggets, and that was like the only sole example given. And this guy was allowed to stay in the country. I mean, I'd like to think this is unbelievable, but I have a funny feeling this is what happens every day.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:28. I don't know where the time's gone. We've done nearly half an hour. Peter Plexy's here, a man after my own heart who's got a lot to say about the next story we're about to cover, which is about deportations. Yesterday, we had the ridiculous story that an Albanian criminal could not be deported back to his home country because his son doesn't like the chicken nuggets that they serve anywhere other than Britain, so he was allowed to stay here. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike and Pete. Brian from Southend here. Great listening. On Starmer again in the Labour Party, all this showboating about raiding nail bars and barbers and all that and deporting X amount of illegal immigrants. Well, they're only doing or raiding places that anyone and everyone like you and me has known has employed these people for ages. Instead of targeting them, which they should do, you know, make it a priority to do all the paedophiles. And like this one that you just mentioned this morning. He can't be deported because his children are about the father. You know, what are these judges on? Do they live on the same planet as us?
I mean, it's true, isn't it? Peter, we've got more and more cases like this. They go before these Home Office tribunals, which I think I'm right in saying are chaired by judges. Yep. So they are genuinely, you know, members of the judiciary. I was saying yesterday, surely it's time that we started questioning who these people are and how it is that they come to the conclusions that they come to.
Yes, we should know their identities, and we should also know the identity of this dirty, stinking paedophile Pakistani sex case.
Yes.
But we don't, because guess what? He's granted anonymity by the tribunal.
What, to protect his privacy?
Yeah, exactly.
What is going on in this country?
I mean, it's utter lunacy.
Yeah.
It really is. And there's some very, very disturbing details about this case.
Okay.
Okay, we mentioned earlier on, he was arrested and convicted of trying to entice 3 prepubescent girls into having sex with him. He got arrested in August 2022, and he got convicted that December, and was made subject of a deportation order by Suella Braverman, who was the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
He got 18 months in jail, and the judge said that this offender was in denial about the offences, right? So no admission of guilt.
Right.
No kind of...
And that's a very common thing, isn't it, with paedophiles? Yeah. They don't think they've done anything wrong.
Absolutely. No remorse, none like that.
Right.
And the judge who heard the original criminal case led to the conclusion, and I can hear my wife nodding furiously when I say this, there was very little prospect of rehabilitation.
No kidding.
Yeah. Now, my wife worked for 16 years of her glittering police career, banging up sex offenders.
Yeah.
And there's not many people know more about them than she does from frontline experience. And she says they can't be rehabilitated.
Of course they can't.
They really can't.
I've probably told you this story before. I interviewed one once when I was doing my radio show in Scotland, and he came in, having been released from Bolini, I think he was, in a prison for various offences that he committed, and he said, they've released me, I've told them I don't want to be released, I've told them I can't be rehabilitated. He said, all I want to do is go and make another a pass at another child. He said, I'm a danger to children. He said, but nobody will believe me. He said, they keep telling me that they can put me in a halfway house and then I can wander off. And when I finished the interview, he wandered off to a shopping centre, which was near where my studio was, and he said, I'm going to sit there and watch the children. And I went, and the police are not... He said, I've told them this. They're not interested in locking me up.
the wonky thinking and the uncontrolled urges of a wrong'un, of a paedophile.
Yeah.
And so it goes. In fact, I hesitate momentarily before saying this.
Yeah.
And somebody really needs to do Freedom of Information Act applications to every police service in the UK. If the public knew how many convicted paedophiles were being monitored in the community,
Yes.
in other words, being presided over by the
Yeah.
police teams that don't have the resources to monitor them like they should do.
Right.
If we knew how many convicted paedophiles there were living amongst us, there would be an absolute scandal.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It's
I've said
worrying.
before, in America, where I live, because I did a lot of work on this back in the day, about 15 or so years ago, maybe longer. In America, they've got a register that you can actually, unlike the sex offenders register here, that you can access as an individual. You don't even have to be a parent, but you could go on the website that they've got in America and you can see where all the sex offenders live. Literally, if you've got one down the road, you can tell your kids not to go past the house. If you've got one, you know, in the next town, you can tell your kids, you know, there's a guy there. I mean, you know, and the worry here is always that, oh, we can't give people that kind of information because they probably lynch the sex offenders. It doesn't happen in America.
Yeah.
They just want to know where they are. And I think parents in particular should be given that privilege, shouldn't they?
So that we and our kids can swerve the dirty paedophiles.
Exactly, and we can at least warn them where they are.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at this character, though, whose name is not allowed to be released. We don't know what it is, so it's not our, you know, we're not, I mean, if I knew what it was, I'd be telling you right now, at the risk of, you know, going to jail for some kind of contempt order. He was imprisoned in December of 2022 and made subject to a deportation order by Suella Braverman, who was Home Secretary at the time. When sentencing him to 18 months in jail, the judge was damning in ruling that he was in denial, as you said, and there was very little prospect of rehabilitation. The judge also said there would be no significant impact on his wife or children by jailing him, as he was clearly not living in the family home anyway, for obvious reasons. He was banned from using social media to contact any underage girls. Does anybody believe that that was held up? And despite the judgment, the lower immigration tribunal judge who heard his appeal against deportation accepted it would be, in his words, unduly harsh to separate him from his children, who he doesn't live with and who he's only allowed to see for up to 12 hours a day under supervised contact.
It is unduly
It's
wrong
ridiculous.
to try and lure young children into having
Seriously.
sex with an adult.
Yeah.
So he should be gone.
He should be gone.
Shackles,
Absolutely.
aeroplane, ta-da,
Yeah.
don't come back.
Here's one from April in Leeds, and this is interesting. She says, my ex-partner has been on a deportation order since 2011. He's been allowed to stay here, unable to access benefits or work this whole time on the basis of the right to a family life. He hasn't seen my two children for 5 years now, but he's out producing kids with all sorts of different women, and due to income, he also pays no child maintenance as well. So these characters, these scumbags who come here, and I'm not going to say we don't have homegrown ones, we probably do, but what we don't need to do is import any more scumbags, thank you very much
Exactly.
indeed,
So
who
we
spend
can-
an awful lot of time creating children with women, surely and quite simply, in order to avoid being deported.
Of course, there is a worryingly high number of homegrown paedophile offenders, but if we could get rid of all the foreign ones that shouldn't be here, all the ones that have been imported into this country, smuggled into this country, illegally entered this country, or illegally overstayed in this country, etc., etc.
Yes.
Then if we were to get rid of all of those, then our resources might be able to be better deployed into stopping others reoffending, monitoring them properly.
Yes. It might well be. I mean, we've got the Labour government now boasting that they're deporting more people than have ever been deported under previous governments, right? But there's pictures in the Daily Telegraph today, which I think we've got, which show you the problem in this country, because have a look at the contrast between the left picture and the right picture. If you're watching, on the right, you've got a load of shackled illegal migrants being taken onto a plane in America and shuffled back to their home country. They're being watched over by one security guard, by the looks of it, or one Border Force official. In England, you need 5 different members of Border Force in yellow high-vis jackets to basically get one bloke on a plane.
And when they
What's
talk
that all about?
And when they talk about the 600 that they arrested for working in nail bars and such like in January, let me just point out that last week alone, bearing in mind we are in the grip of winter,
Yeah, and it's very cold.
392 came over in small boats.
Right.
So there's, that in 1 week.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
So getting rid of 600 is not even a month's worth, is it?
These numbers are not even scratching the surface of the problem.
Yeah.
We need wholesale industrial efforts whereby we need to deport tens upon tens of thousands of foreign criminals that have come here, illegal migrants, overstayers, and the rest. We need to deport them on an industrial scale.
Yeah. Exactly right. Peter Blexy's here talking absolute sense as ever. A couple of messages that I want to read out to you. One from Sean in Gloucester. It's all very well the Keith Starlin sacking 2 MPs, but what about everyone else in that WhatsApp group? Shouldn't they go as well? Furthermore, he replaces them with yet more weirdos. Yeah, this weird woman who seems to think that it's okay to identify as a llama and who thinks a woman can have a penis. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike and Peter. It's Mark in Lancashire. Loving listening to your little discussion about Donald Trump this morning. And for me, the biggest thing that Trump has exposed is how useless and lazy and totally ineffective all our political leaders are. For years, they've been telling us, oh, it's not that simple, it's complicated. You can't just do this or you can't just do that. Trump's come in and he's totally just being a total political whirlwind of effectiveness and just made everybody else look like a load of foolish liars, which they are. So we are now going to want a bit of this at the next election, which is a great thing.
Absolutely right. Quite well said. Stephen says, this morning, Mike, Steve from Middlesbrough, so we have a Starmer Llama Charmer in government. God help us. I think we could all say, so say all of us to that one. Me and Peter Blexley back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Peter Blexy's here with us as well. 6:41. We're here until, of course, 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer takes over for glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. Sharp. If you haven't managed to make it up that early, then we forgive you, but you don't do it again because you miss all the glory, all the gold and all the good stuff that happens straight off at the very beginning of the show. Let's get a voice note from Kevin.
Mike, it's Kevin from Birmingham. Have these 2 MPs that were suspended or sacked been reported to the courts for the hate of speech hate? Oh, bugger.
Hate speech. I know what you mean. It's
Hate
early in the
speech. We
morning,
know what it
Kev.
means.
It's early in the morning. We can translate for you. Don't worry. Police have received a formal complaint over alleged hate speech and anti-Semitism in messages that saw Denton MP Andrew Gwynn sacked as a minister. I'm pretty sure I saw a story last night that said that the incident of the WhatsApp messages was going to be recorded as a non-crime hate crime, which is all very well. But, you know, he's an MP. Surely he should now be an ex-MP, shouldn't he?
Non-crime hate incident. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If Gwynn had one shred of common decency, after he's been booted out of his ministerial role and booted out of the Labour Party effectively, well suspended, what he would then do is fall on his sword and resign from his circa £90,000 a year job as an MP.
Right.
But, of course, he's been an MP for 20 years, so you can bet he's sorted a few quid away and he's probably quite comfortably off.
Yeah.
And he's thinking, where else am I ever going to get 90 grand from?
Yes.
Who's going to pay me that
kind of money? Yeah.
So he will cling on.
Because most Labour MPs, he's only ever been some kind of politician. He's only been a councillor or a special advisor or an MP. They haven't done any proper jobs, have they?
Hence we have such little experience in the cabinet.
Yeah.
No one's run a business. There's no business people in there. There's no people with real huge, valuable experience of the outside world.
Well, hang on, how about Rachel Reeves? I mean, wasn't she an economist at the Bank of England and also an H-boss?
Ah, well, now I'm going to get pilloried by the Labour Party because I'll use that nickname that so many have used to describe her, Rachel from Accounts.
Rachel from Accounts.
Oh, misogynist!
Oh, no.
Misogynist, far-right misogynist.
Well,
sorry,
Andrew
Rachel.
Neil addressed this issue over the weekend because he said all these people shouting misogynist at everybody who calls it Rachel from Accounts. He said they've all forgotten that Philip Hammond, when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, also pretty hapless at the job, he was referred to by Andrew Neil and many others as Spreadsheet Phil.
Yeah.
You know, so what's the difference? How is it in any way misogynistic? But let's talk about that because it's the 50th anniversary of Margaret Thatcher taking over the leadership of the Conservative Party. Seems a very long time ago. I'm actually staggered that I can even remember the time in 1975 when I was alive. I was 15 years old. And what a different country we then lived in, because we've now got a story on the front page of the Times that says half of Generation Z, or Z, I don't know what you want to call it, think Britain is a racist country and just 1 in 10 of them would risk their lives to defend it in a war. I mean, I remember when we went to the Falkland Islands, right, and which was a few years later, 1982, I was then 22, I was literally champing at the bit. I wanted to go, you know, which sounds mad now, but I was, you know, I was so fired up that I thought, the hell were these Argies trying to take us for fools? I'm going to go and join the boys down in the Falkland Islands and kick some Argie ass. But now, apparently, nobody wants to do that.
No. And I've got to tell you, if Putin had decided to invade the Isle of Wight instead of Ukraine, it would paint a very, very worrying picture, because these cowardly people, these cowardly young people who don't want to fight for their country have been clearly spoilt, have been clearly
They love the
poorly
benefits
raised.
of living here, don't they?
Absolutely, like avocado smoothies and all that nonsense, right? And they have been poorly raised. They've been poorly taught at school, because there is nothing wrong with being rightfully proud of your country. And the highest honour, I think, for anybody is to be willing to lay down your life for your country.
Exactly.
So that's why I have such towering respect for our armed services, those wonderful men and women who would sacrifice themselves at the drop of a hat
for nothing,
and serve our nation.
For no reward really whatsoever.
You don't
and for
get
being
rich.
for being treated appallingly when they come out of the services.
Yeah, I'm afraid, unfortunately, look at the amount of veterans that are homeless and such.
Well, this government only last week announced, because we spoke to our good friend Hugh Andre about this from weserved.com, and he said they're now trying to take away the death in service benefit from people, spouses and families who are not married, right? As if to say that, you know, basically you don't count, you don't matter. If your husband or if your wife dies in combat and you don't happen to have got married together, even though you've lived together for years, we'll give you nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, they need,
unbelievable.
It's 2025. They need to catch up with the times.
Yeah.
And if they were to put conditions on it, for example, that you had to prove that you were cohabiting and you had to have been together for 18 months or 2 years or something as a minimum, I don't think people would disagree with that.
Yeah.
If you're cohabiting, you know, so many people in this day and age cohabit for years raise their children, live as partners, but just don't want to get married.
Or they don't get round to it sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, you would recommend it because you've been married for many, many years, very happily.
Yeah.
I would not recommend it on the grounds that that was not my experience. But there we are. Everybody's got a different experience. Let me ask you about 1975, though. You're a bit younger than me, I think. Thatcher's legacy. I mean, I don't remember Thatcher so much in 1975, but I do remember the world being a lot simpler. I was embarking upon my sort of first job at the weekends and the holidays. I was embarking probably on my first girlfriend at some point or other. Seems a long time ago.
Yeah, same age, Mike. I was 15 in 1975, and very foolishly, I was bunking off of school.
Yeah.
You know,
as you do.
Kids, if you're listening, pay attention. It makes life a lot easier if you can get some exams and qualifications. So I'd foolishly bunk off of school, go home. My mum was working, of course.
Yeah.
We lived in a flat in Bexley Heath. Unbeknown to her, I'm bunking off. I get changed into my civvy clothes out of the school uniform, and then go down the bookies and sitting out in the bookies in the afternoon trying to win a few.
I mean, see, I was looked about 10 when I was 15, so I couldn't really get away with that sort of thing.
And then I'd go to the newsagents, drop my voice an octave or two, and try and buy a magazine off the top shelf.
Yes.
But enough of that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, they were the sort of things I was doing, as well as watching QPR and playing cricket. Happy days, you know, kind of carefree days. Did I have any great interest in politics? A passing interest. A passing interest. Because, of course, you know, this is the era of the winter of discontent, when bins aren't being collected, when I'd been crouched round a candle at night with my mum.
Power cuts.
Because
and all that.
we had the 3-day week under Ted Heath and the such like. So
also, politics, even though it was all around you then, didn't seem to affect people's lives. We sort of got on with our lives despite it. Whereas now, you feel as though you're kind of being harassed on every corner by the failings of our politicians. You know, you can't drive down a road in London because Sadiq Khan's closed it off, or because, you know, they've narrowed it to such an extent that there's a bus lane there's a cycle lane, you can't go anywhere. You know, you can't make a living because they're taxing you up the wazoo. You know, it feels a lot more like the government's got a lot bigger, doesn't it?
And you can't get out of London, and many places within London, without seeing the inevitable and tragic decline of this nation.
Yeah.
The empty shop fronts, the neglected high streets.
Yes.
The dreadful standard of some housing, social housing.
The out-of-control crime.
The graffiti, the crime, the grubbiness of the nation. Fine if you live in Surrey and you've got a £2 million house and all that kind of
gated community.
You won't recognise what I'm talking about.
I was going home on the bus yesterday, right, and I live not a million miles away from here, and a woman who I'd never met before, older woman, was with two of her friends, and they were talking about, and they started talking to me about how these cycle gangs now are robbing people in the park, the local park near where I live, which is not far from Surrey Quays. There's three of them, and they knew every single detail. They said there's two of them that come up behind you, there's another one ahead of them. They phone them to say you're coming, and they literally rob you as long as there's nobody else around. They don't mind knocking you over. They don't mind if you're a woman or an old woman. They steal whatever they want. They steal a handbag, they steal a watch, they steal a phone. I mean, it's lawless out there.
With very little chance of getting caught.
Yeah.
No fear of bumping into a police officer walking around the corner as they make their escape.
Yeah.
Very little chance of a suitably deterrent type punishment if they do get caught and go to court.
They won't go to prison.
No, well, they certainly won't get locked up for the amount of time that they should do. And even if they do, they'll then go to a young offenders institute, which is just like a university of crime, full of violence, where people are not rehabilitated, and they come out often with an even worse attitude and a greater determination to commit crime. If they're adults, of course, we know the prisons are at breaking point. The whole criminal justice system is a mess. And it's really important to people, because the example that you were told yesterday can, regrettably, be replicated in most parts of the country with regards to some form of crime or another.
Totally.
Everybody's got an anecdote, or everybody's been a victim, or everybody knows somebody who's been a victim. And back in my day, when I was a young 18, 19-year-old cop, me and my colleagues were utterly intolerant of crime.
Right.
Really intolerant of it.
Yeah.
If you came in to do an early turn at 6 o'clock in the morning and the sergeant that paraded you and briefed you said there'd been burglaries overnight, people really had the hump. Us officers really had the hump. What can we do? Where can we go? You know, and you went out and you patrolled those streets and you were very protective about them. OK, crime did happen. I'm not saying it was a crime-free nirvana, but when crime did happen, we were angry about it. We were determined to catch the people that were responsible. And yes, there was crime. No, we didn't solve it all. But I challenge anyone that was around in the late 70s to say they didn't feel safer. Because I think people did.
Totally. Absolutely right. Very well said. A couple of messages have come in on the Shawaddy Waddy front, on the boots that Angela Rayner's wearing. Katie says, as one of the last surviving fans of Shawaddy Waddy, I find that comparison insulting. Sorry, Katie. Marco says, I wish Keir Starmer identified as a llama. Then we could call him Starmer the Llama, and he would probably talk a lot more bloody sense. Love the Labour trashing. Keep it up, says Marco from Swindon, currently identified as a chicken. One from Andy in Notts, who says, I think the majority of the country are looking forward to the day when this entire Labour government identifies as a dodo, which would be nice. Let's get a voice note from Gaz.
Morning, Mike. Cracking show, mate. Gaz from Pontefract. Good morning, boys and girls. What did you have for breakfast?
I had beans and hostages.
Silly Billy Keir. You mean sausages.
Of course. Anyway, I've been busy smashing the snuggling guns.
Silly Billy. You mean smuggling gangs, Keir.
Why does it keep happening?
Tragically, it's more true than you would ever know. We're running very terribly late. We better go. Peter Blexley's here. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory.
Amongst the bad things that have been said, the thing that stood out was that he described one gentleman as being too Jewish. Now, Keir Starmer told us that he cleaned up the Labour Party, but it very much looks this morning like he hasn't. I think there needs to be a very serious investigation, public investigation into who else was on that group. What did they say? Did they call out Mr Gwynne when he made those anti-Semitic remarks? Because otherwise I think people will just draw the conclusion that this is the same old anti-Semitic Labour Party.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:57. I'm here until 10 o'clock. Peter Blexley's here until 7. With this, says Tony Tucker, the new health minister saying you can identify as a llama. Is this a way of cutting NHS waiting lists, as they will soon be going to see a vet? That's quite a good one. Morning, Mike. Herman from the Munsters sprung to mind when I saw the shoes, says Maureen in Stamford. And a cab driver has sent a message in to me on Twitter, or X if you prefer, who says this. I agree. Her taste in footwear, and we're talking about Angela Rayner, is somewhat unique. I've driven her in my cab a few times, and her footwear is always outlandish, but it's her taste, so what? Did Boris brush his hair when having his weekly meet with the Queen? Of course the scruffy git didn't. Well, it's a bit different, isn't it? I mean, you can wear different shoes without having to get the hairdressers. You can put your wardrobe together if you're going to see the King. I don't think you would pick shoes like that to go, I'll wear these for the King and that'll be good. Would you?
Her fashion sense is all of her own. But she does seem to be in many, many different outfits, and I make no criticism of that. I'd just be very interested to know how she funds it all.
Well, who's paying for it all?
Does it all come out of her own pocket?
Well,
if so, fair dues.
I think we know that it doesn't, because Lord Ali certainly paid for quite a lot of her outfits in the beginning when they first got into power. Let's talk about Prince Andrew. He's on the front pages again. Front page of the Daily Mail, Royal World exclusive. Andrew, the security risk financier and an £8 billion venture, apparently not content with getting involved with some Chinese spy. He's now embroiled in another row about a Middle East business venture with the former ambassador to Russia, who was once assessed as a threat to national security.
There is always an inescapable stench around any story that features Prince Andrew.
The Duke of York.
The Duke of York. There you go. He had 10,000 men. Well, he's always trying to earn £10,000, isn't he?
It does seem to be that.
However, in whatever way he can do that. I mean, this never-ending list of links to people that have very dodgy backgrounds, as he, I think, desperately tries to earn a pound note. The latest one is called Oleg Fyra. I think I pronounced that correctly. And he's got a very questionable past, because he's been refused entry to the Caribbean when he was supposed to be some kind of ambassador. And the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, because he appealed it, said that he was properly refused entry on national security grounds, was Mr. Oleg Fyra.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, Peter. We can't go any further.
Oh, dear.
Thank you very much indeed. What a great hour. Peter Blexley is back from holiday, and he's firing on all cylinders. We'll be back after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of
the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike in
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's Mike Graham here. It's Morning Glory. It's something like nearly 3 minutes past 7. I don't know where the time has gone. That's the first hour gone already. Peter Blexley was in looking at all the big stories in the front pages of the papers and also elsewhere in the papers. We're going to be talking about some of those too. China is getting a lot of flack this morning because it turns out that they're getting a piece of a wind farm in Scotland. That's according to The Sun this morning. We're apparently allowing them to be part of a new project to build, what can be called sustainable energy. But the problem is that it's probably going to be a threat to national security. Prince Andrew's on the front page of the Daily Mail, also a threat to national security because he appears to be doing business with a guy who was once banned from entering a Commonwealth country because he was a threat to national security. We've got a second MP suspended over his WhatsApp messages. I said it was going to happen yesterday, and of course it did happen. Also, Gen Z, not proud to be British. I think that tells you an awful lot about how far we've moved from the time when Margaret Thatcher, 50 years ago today, became the leader of the Conservative Party. She was Prime Minister, of course, in 1979. But she changed Britain for the better. There are still people that whinge and moan about how she took their livelihoods away and she sold council houses. They never quite recovered. But for most people, and I say this without fear or favour, for most people, Margaret Thatcher was an absolute boon, an absolute inspiration, and an incredible magnet for change, if you like, in this country. Because if you lived long enough, if you're old enough to remember the 1970s, it was an absolute shambles. Most of the 1970s, and I can tell you that because I lived there, was completely and utterly ridiculous. There were strikes every single day. There were strikes every single week. I went to school only one day a week because there were power cuts every single day for about 3 months because there wasn't the ability to actually create enough energy to heat the school that I was supposedly going to every day. There were funeral directors who couldn't bury dead people, so the dead were sort of piling up in funeral homes. You couldn't get any rubbish taken away. Leicester Square was a complete rubbish dump. It was piled high with black bin bags, literally to the height of half the size of the trees there, something like 40 feet high. It was absolutely awful. The unions were running everything. You couldn't do anything in terms of industry. You couldn't make any cars. They were always on strike. You couldn't produce any newspapers. They were always on strike. Dockers were always on strike. Train workers were on strike. It was a complete and utter shambles. Britain was a basket case. It's where we're heading now, funnily enough. And guess what's similar? Oh yeah, Labour are in. 0344 499 1000. Keir Starmer, the llama harmer, has just appointed a new Minister for Health who thinks you can identify as a llama and you'll be fine. Let's hear from some of you and hear what you got to say.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always.
Morning, Mike. It's Fiona in Dorset.
Hi, Mike. Kate from Leeds.
Hi, Mike. Junior from Bristol.
Loving the extended show. 4 hours of Mike Graham, Monday to Friday. Loving it. Brilliant.
Exactly right. And how about this? Have you seen the state of this country, says Sharon? It's dirty, the infrastructure needs to be torn down and rebuilt. They look that disgusting. Our pavements are disgusting too. There's litter everywhere. It's very reminiscent of the 70s. All you got to do is put Labour in charge and it suddenly all goes horribly wrong. The only chance they ever had to have a successful Prime Minister was when they had Tony Blair. Loads of you will argue about that and say, oh no, he was a terrible man. Well, yeah, he was, but at least he had pride in his country and at least he actually understood that the way to make money money in this country is to encourage entrepreneurs and businesses to do well. This country is killing them all off. Coming up, we're going to talk to James Price, former government advisor. We're going to tell you more about Donald Trump and how he is taking on the world and winning. And also, we'll have a bit of a reminisce about Margaret Thatcher. Why not? 0344 499 1000. What were you doing 50 years ago if you were, in fact, alive? This is Talk. Fascinating messages coming in. Chris says this, Mike, I'm not sure why Keir and his cronies are raiding nail bars, car washes and massage parlours. I can point out several hotels full of illegal immigrants that could be deported tomorrow. That's a very good point. And we know exactly where they are. Maureen in Stamford says, Mike, you might be missing the point. Why would youngsters want to fight for our country? What for, when our own government is fighting against it? Well, Maureen, the point about our country is that we should never, and I say this very often, we should never be in any way led by our politicians. You know, we have pride in our country because we're British, because we love our country, because we love Britain. We don't love the politicians that run it. They're like football managers. We give them permission to sort of manage the country for a period of time, and then we vote them out. And then the next lot come in, but the remains of the country remain the same. If you're a Manchester United fan right now, you're thinking, when is this awful, awful nightmare going to end? You know, this team can't seem to win anything. They used to be a colossus. They used to be the biggest and one of the best football clubs in the entire world. They're now suffering. But you don't take it out on the club. You still love the club. And that's how I feel about Britain. Britain is still an incredible country, full of incredible people, regardless of who's running it and regardless of the politicians. And I think that is what will save us in the end. Let's talk to James Price and see if he agrees. James, very good morning to you.
Hello, my friend. I always agree with you, Mike.
A dangerous policy, that, some would say. But, I mean, it's true, isn't it? I mean, this Gen Z story doesn't surprise me. I heard Jeremy Kyle talking about it yesterday. You know, 1 in 10 people think it's a racist country. They think it's, you know, done harm to all sorts of people around the world. They've been taught that at school. They've been taught that at university. I don't go along with those who say, why would they want to fight for the country when it's so awful? I don't agree with that. I think Britain will always be a great country because of the people who live here, not because of the government.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think it's very dangerous to conflate the present administration, or indeed any administration, with the country. I do think it's important to have that kind of conversation about what those differences are. It's a bit sort of nerdy, but yeah. England, Britain, the UK, all these, one of those, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, they're all constituent parts of this place that we all call home. And I think that that's the fundamental bit that people have lost or forgotten. We're not a member state, God forbid, of anything, especially the EU. And we're not a project either that some people have described it as. We're a home, we're a place. Yeah. And that wonderful old conservative philosopher, much missed, Roger Scruton, used to talk about oikophilia, love of place, not love of oiks, absolutely not. And, you know, that is a sense of traditions and of social mores and of ways of doing things. It's a lot deeper than just, oh, let's have a cup of tea and that sort of silly twee stuff, although that's a part of it as well. And people used to get all of that stuff. They used to imbibe it and breathe it in, not just at school, being taught nebulous British values, which after, I think, the Second World War, the whole world's supposed to have kind of Anglo values, let's say. But you used to imbibe all of that stuff. And the problem we've had is that in recent decades, so many people have entered the country from all around the world, even if they were all, as we've talked about before, all Shakespeare, all the best and brightest, which I fear they're not. You know, you don't have that kind of imbibing of Britishness and therefore the pride that you'd have in this. And I think that's a big underrated part of the problem when you look at these stats. Younger people tend to be, you know, more likely to be from families who've come more recently, and that's probably reflected in some of these numbers, as well as the indoctrination we've seen from the left.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. You know, I mean, we used to know when I was growing up, and as I say, this is sort of conversation has been slightly triggered by Margaret Thatcher when she came into power 50 years ago as the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm sure you're far too young to remember that, but I do. There was a sense that we sort of knew what was right and wrong. And now you walk around the streets of London, certainly, and you can see that that's completely disappeared. You know, people don't know what's right and what's wrong because they're coming from all these different places where their experience has been very, very different. And, for example, you know, in terms of what you do, even just in terms of being polite on the tube, you know, that kind of thing, letting people off before you get on. They don't do that anymore. You know, I have to, you know, fight my way off the train quite often and say to people, you're supposed to wait until we get off, actually, and they look at you like you're talking Japanese, you know, or similarly walking down the street and sort of, you know, letting somebody walk past and giving way to them, and they don't even say thank you. Same with driving around in a car. You know, you let somebody in, they don't say thank you. In Britain, that's what we do. That's what we used to do, and that's gone now, it seems to me. And so it's important that those of us who believe that that's still quite an important part of being civilised, we still do it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And the really difficult, interesting thing here is whether any government, whether the state, local councils, whatever, can enforce any of that stuff. I mentioned Roger Scruton before. His kind of key insight into why small c conservatism, you know, what that really meant, was this idea that things are very hard to build and to maintain, but they're very easy to destroy. And the work of destruction is kind of exhilarating and over in a moment. And when you lose those sorts of wonderful things that I think made Britain, you know, a uniquely wonderful place in the history of the world, all of those sort of subtle social interactions that you talk about, it's going to be very hard for us to get some of that stuff back without us hardening our hearts. And I don't think that it can be done, frankly, because things have fallen so far, without, and I can't believe me as a small state conservative is saying this, without some more state intervention. It's all very well telling people on the train, hey, why the hell are you playing music with your earphones not in? Why are you subjecting all of us to listen to this ghastly music or whatever? But we've all heard stories, and these are real stories, that when someone has stood up and asked that, the miscreant goes and stabs them and kills them to death. And the police are not enforcing these sorts of things.
Exactly.
So
but instead of the railways enforcing that, what you get is a sort of meaningless message from a disembodied voice saying, please respect one another. You know, and you kind of go, well, what the hell does that mean? I was on a train coming back from Scotland, and some football fans got on, and the announcement came over the tannoy, you know, please mind your language, please be aware that you shouldn't offend people by, you know, and it was like, just drive the bleeding train, you know, and get to the stations quicker, like you said you would, because that's what you're supposed to do. But I was listening to Ian Collins' show yesterday, and he had an interesting caller who said that one of the problems that we have in this conversation about whether conservatism is now a thing of the past, whether the Tories should get into bed with reform. Kemi Badenoch's talking in the Telegraph today saying it's never going to happen. It's a bit of a red herring because Nigel Farage is also saying it's never going to happen, so why are we talking about it, I don't know. But this guy was saying that socialism has changed, and that socialism, which used to be a very small kind of, you know, almost commune-like inspired movement of people who wanted just to live in a very small, you know, bubble and try to sort of look after those who couldn't look after themselves and be the party of the working classes, is now the party of the sort of globalists. You know, Tony Blair brought us this new kind of socialism where, you know, join the World Health Organization, get in bed with the United Nations, you know, talk to the World Economic Forum, get an idea of net zero from everybody else in the world and make sure that that's what you sell to the ordinary people and completely destroy whatever notion you had of the working class, completely destroy any notion of the community, and just build yourself into a country that wants to be part of the European Union, and if you like, do away with your own flag.
You're absolutely right. You know, Marx used to say, workers of the world, unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains. I think it's now bureaucrats of the world.
It is. It's true.
And it's a peculiar thing that it's happening the same way across every country because, as you say, these sorts of international bodies, and I don't want to be too conspiracy theorist about it, but I do think that it's a way for weak people to try and exercise control because they know that things they want to do to us to force us to have that kind of utter conformity. They can't do that at the ballot box, which is why Labour are doing all these dreadful things now that they never talked about during the last election. And you mentioned the great lady, Mrs. Thatcher, who I think we should all look up to as an inspiration for how to turn around, not just kind of economic decline, but to fight back against those, I think, pretty disgusting socialist ideas.
I don't think you can ever overestimate what she did for this country.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Unfortunately, you know, in those 11 and a half years, the one thing she didn't manage to do was to smash up what we now call the blob, the power of the civil service. She tried with things like arm's length bodies. She thought that if you punted power out from the central government departments to these sorts of places, that they would be sort of sound because they weren't, central government things. And unfortunately, those have all been taken over as well. So I think we should strip all of those things away and put responsibility back in the hands of directly elected ministers. Can you imagine how scared all these Labour ministers would actually be if they actually had power rather than just pretending to? It would be delicious to watch them fail properly.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we can't avoid the front page of the Sun this morning. Woolly thinking. He's managed to... Keir Starmer... I mean, my producer Christian asked me this morning, do you think there's somebody actually deliberately trying to screw up Keir Starmer's prime ministership by just giving him really, really bad advice? Like, let's not bother checking the background of this woman, Ashley Dalton. Let's just appoint her as a health minister to replace the health minister that wants to kill off pensioners and is anti-Semitic and racist. And let's replace him with this woman who's previously said you can identify as a llama and, of course, you can have a penis even if you're a woman.
It's the only explanation, isn't it? I think, was it Robert Conquest's third law of politics? The best way to understand any organisation is just to assume it's run by a cabal of its enemies, and that would make a lot of sense here. You almost do think that Starmer secretly... Everyone thinks he's being run by international law and all that sort of nonsense. Actually, he's a deep sleeper cell agent for Nigel Farage and Reform.
I mean, is Morgan McSweeney a secret sort of reform agent in some way?
Absolutely right. But this is where we've got to. Just as America, who gave us all of this kind of complete woke tosh, has shorn itself of it, maybe with all of its woolly thinking, it's got away from all of this. And every big tech company in America is now getting rid of all of this nonsense. All the big banks are finally thinking, thank God we haven't got to waste all this money on what they call DEI, diversity and equity and inclusion. You have all these people whose job it is to walk around a company, whose job obviously is supposed to be to make money, going, you're a racist, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a sexist, you're a dreadful person, all this stuff. We are still keeping up with this kind of mad idea. And that's why you can now have a health minister, someone whose job it is to keep us healthy and safe, as you say, thinking mad things like if someone says they're a llama, then they're a llama. And you see all these stories, and it happens in schools. The worst one I had was that when I was in the Department for Education, a girl who said that she identified as a horse and therefore insisted on being taken out for a canter around the school field at break time. This is mental illness. We need to treat people rather than pander to it.
I know, absolutely. She's put a bit in her mouth and see how she liked that. But, there we are. James, good to talk to you, as ever. James Price, former government advisor there, on whether Britain has become a worse country to live in since 1975. I think the answer is probably yes. Many of you will have stories about it, and I'm not trying to, sort of somehow change the world for those of you who weren't alive in the 70s. You might not remember it, but you might have heard stories about it. We've got Paul from Essex who wants to tell us a story. He was around then. Paul, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, sir. Very well, sir. What have you got for us?
It's actually 79 when Margaret Thatcher was going through a process of becoming the first female PM.
Yeah.
And I lived in Yorkshire, and I went out canvassing, door knocking in Dewsbury, which was a bloody awful left-wing place.
Right.
But I went out with a local party agent, we were knocking on doors, and we knocked on one door, and this old boy said, "Oh, Conservative Party, I've got something for you, just wait there a minute."
Right.
And he pushed the door half shut, and I looked at the Conservative agent, I said, "What's this about?" He said, "Oh, some of these old boys," he said, "sometimes will come out with a packet of biscuits or a bit of tea or something like that." He said, "Whatever it is he gives us, just nod, smile, say thank you, and back down the footpath." I said, "Oh, okay then."
Right.
So we both stood there, the door opened, and all I saw was a bucket. Ice cold water over the two of us. And he said, "Now bugger off and don't come back," and slammed the door shut. And all I did was look at the door, smile, and say thank you, and back off. You want uniform.
You want to tell that that sort of punchline, don't you, of the guy who always talks about going on door knocking sprees for various parties and then you go, "I'll take that down as a maybe then." But I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it? People feel this vitriol for Margaret Thatcher, and they did then, and they still do now. Even people who weren't alive then. You go to Liverpool, you go to sort of some of these, left-wing bastions of the country, and they talk about her as if she's like the devil incarnate. I've never understood the hatred for her.
Frightened, silly little people with small minds.
Yeah. Totally. She did brilliant things for this country. Paul, listen, thank you very much indeed. And I'm not going to try and turn this show into a homage to Margaret Thatcher, but she was an amazing woman. And don't forget, the Labour government currently in situ, old Keir Starmer was practically wetting himself with delight when he announced that, we're going to have a woman chancellor. Young women and girls will be looking up to her as she gets the job for the first time as a woman. Well, they haven't managed to get a woman leader, have they? Because they're that sexist, they're that hate-filled about the idea of Margaret Thatcher. Although maybe they'll get one soon, because the way things are going, it's not going to be old Starmer who's in charge. It's going to be Angela Rayner with those bother boy shawaddy-waddy boots and that ridiculous green coat. Can you imagine her going to these summits? By the way, Keir Starmer isn't at a summit this week. I told you last week he's decided not to go to the AI summit, which is in Paris today, I think, for world leaders. So knowing him, it will be one that he probably should be at because it's only in Paris. Maybe it's not far enough away. No, I only go to things in Samoa and places like the United States of America, saving myself for Donald Trump in Washington. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. James from Blackburn. It's finally happened. It's not real, this, is it? We've crash landed somewhere else. I mean, it's only Tuesday. What on earth is going on? I mean, he's off doing HIV tests on Sakir. I mean, why is he doing an HIV test? Then he hot-foots it and goes and sees the king, and his deputy leader turns up wearing Herman Munster's shoes. I mean, what's she doing? Then he gets back and he thinks, right, we've got a bit of business to do, so we're going to have to sack some people. Oh, we'll get rid of the health minister, because as we said yesterday, he wants people dead. And we're going to replace him with a woman who doesn't know what a woman is, and also thinks that people should be able to identify as llamas. I mean, it's just, what is going on? What the hell's going on, Mike? Christ alive.
I mean, it can't be right, can it? James, again, brilliant. It can't be right. Surely to God. They must have a playbook somewhere. I know Sue Gray didn't last any more than 93 days, but is there no grid of any kind? Is there a grid that says at some point or other, the next time we lose a minister, make sure you replace her or him with somebody who identifies as a llama or allows you to identify as a llama, looks like Eddie Izzard, apparently claims to be a woman, but may or may not have a penis. These are important questions. This from Sutton Coldfield. Lynn says, morning, Mike. The country is being totally destroyed from within. I'm so depressed and fearful for what the future holds for my grandchildren. There is absolutely no common sense anywhere. It is total madness every time I hear Starmer et al. Open their mouths. True. Stuart says, morning, Mike. From Bradford, this shambles of a government probably identify as MPs, so we have to believe them. Sonia says, my dogs identify as humans. Well, the humans' dogs have probably got more sense than anybody who's currently in the Labour cabinet. Because let's not forget, we haven't got round to it yet, but I would say the next sort of skittle to fall or be knocked over is Lord Hermer, or as I like to call him, Lord Harmer, who is, of course, Keir Starmer's best mate, who was brought in to be Attorney General. A leading Labour peer last night branded him arrogant, progressive and a fool and called for him to be sacked. So it's all going really well. This is from Lord Glassman of the Blue Labour Group. He said, Lord Harmer has got to go. His insistence on the primacy of international law is damaging government. This is a guy who doesn't put Britain first. He puts international law first. He's not one of these, absolutely pathetic human rights types who thinks that the world is more important than Britain. Well, I'm sorry. If you're running Britain, Britain is more important than the world. It's quite simple. It's not difficult. America first is what Donald Trump sells you, and he's right, and he puts America first. We should put Britain first. Can we not have that as a slogan? Never mind trying to copy reform. Never mind trying to make out that, you're going to save us all from the illegal migration when you're not going to. Put Britain first, tell us you're going to do it, and show us you're going to do it. It's quite simple. This is talk. Sorry.
We saw the grisly image of three men, gaunt, hollow-eyed, barely able to walk, being basically put up on stage, surrounded by men with balaclavas and guns. They left in the most incredible emaciated state. We think, long-term damage, one barely able to walk. And it wasn't just Eli Sharabi who found out about losing his wife and children. Apparently he asked, where are my wife and daughters? Why aren't they here? And the news had to be broken to him just moments after he was forced to say he was looking forward to see them by these evil, sadistic torturers.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 28 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. The sun is kind of attempting to make a rising motion this morning, but it's still looking pretty gloomy, pretty cold as well. Spring, I'm sure, is in the air at some point, but it was pretty cold yesterday as well. And loads of people turned up. I think there were more than 1,000 tractors sitting in Whitehall at one point yesterday. Absolutely extraordinary scenes. And I put a tweet out saying, does this look like a government that is in control of what it's actually doing? And it looked to me like an amazing day out for people from the farming communities of this country who are absolutely dead set on making this government reverse their ridiculous inheritance tax drive to try and put these farmers out of business. I mean, look at that scene there, if you're watching the TV now. Brought the entire centre of Westminster to a standstill. Very peaceful, very respectful, but very determined as well. Let's talk to Mo Metcalfe-Fisher, External Affairs Director of the Countryside Alliance. Mo, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
It was a big turnout yesterday, and a lot of voices were heard. I saw, unusually, I mean, they'll probably argue with me and say they did it last time, but I saw quite a few Conservative MPs out there mixing with the farmers, having their pictures taken, talking to them. Obviously, Reform were there. Nigel Farage was speaking as well. What did you find about this particular demonstration that would encourage you to think that maybe you're going to make some inroads here?
Well, I think the most important thing, Mike, is what you alluded to earlier. It's just there's no waning on the part of farmers. In fact, if anything, I think farmers have got a lot more organised and sophisticated in their campaigning methods. And it's one thing having these demonstrations in Westminster. We do it because it's symbolic. It's about bringing the message to Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. Right. They're not in listening mode. They don't want to engage at all. OK, they just don't want to engage. So what farmers are now doing is they're doing a lot more demonstrating and I would say public liaison in constituencies all around the country. And I've said it before, but if I was an MP who sided with the government on this disastrous family farm tax, and I had 20 or 30 farmers turn up to supermarket car parks in my constituency, and I was sat on a small majority, I'd be a bit scared because the public actually like farmers. Yeah. They're not massive fans of politicians. Right. And so if you've got farmers out there basically talking about this policy and talking about the local MP and almost campaigning, this is going to go on for months and months and months. If anything, this is, as I said, it's awakening a sort of fire in the belly of farmers. And that's what you can see there today. And look, did you see, Mike, how many of those people are young people? Yeah. Because it's about them. At the end of the day, all of this is about them. And we had some amazing speakers, including one very young girl. Who's dreamed of doing this. This is her dream. And so we were there to fight for her.
Yeah. No, I mean, I saw a lot of people being interviewed yesterday who were not even farmers, who had come to the demonstration, who said, look, my friend's a farmer, I'm in my 20s, you know, this is the future for us, you know, and somebody said, why are you here? And he said, well, it's because it's wrong. It's just wrong. And it is so wrong-headed. But they're so pig-headed in government right now. You wonder what's it going to take for them to sort of turn and twist and accept that they have got it wrong?
I don't know, Mike. I mean, you know, we're talking here about reason and common sense. We're not talking about U-turns. We're not talking about trying to embarrass the government. Yeah. We're talking about trying to find a way forward out of the mess. But They're not interested. It's like they're more obsessed with ego and pride than they are with the kind of reason and common sense approach. And you're right, Mike. And this is what should worry Labour MPs and people supporting this policy, is that this is incredibly unpopular with the public and even Labour's voters. Poll after poll shows it. You and I aren't farmers, Mike. You know, we get farmers. Right. I mean, in the Countryside Alliance, obviously, I represent lots of farming families that are going to be hit by this. It cuts through in a way that I really don't think that Whitehall boffins and the government understand.
No.
But I think they're finding out. I mean, look at those scenes. That would worry me. It's not something that's... It's not healthy, Mike. It's not healthy to be in this mess. It's not healthy for the countryside and Whitehall to be at loggerheads. There are so many conversations that need to happen about the countryside and the very fragile rural communities. But until this issue is addressed, it will overshadow everything. And every time the government wants to talk about its agenda that relates to the countryside, this will keep coming back. And that's not healthy, because we've got a load of issues in the countryside that need fixing.
Yeah, absolutely right. And all it does really is it sort of highlights the fact that so many people in government, in particular in this government, have no clue what it's actually even like to take a train outside of the sort of the London, Greater London area. They don't know, they wouldn't know what to do. They get a nosebleed if they went to Wiltshire, you know, and saw a lot of green fields. They wouldn't know, oh my goodness, I haven't even got any boots to walk in. Oh, it's very muddy, isn't it? You know, and I've seen it in the media as well, where so many people who don't ever leave London don't understand what most of this country actually lives like.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is now, Mike, remember, there's a lot of rural constituencies that are now represented by the Labour Party.
Yeah.
You know, for the first time in a very long time. We're talking over 100, 130 upwards, you know, more than that, seats now. So there's no excuse for not understanding the countryside. They're in the countryside.
Yeah.
And they've had, you know, countless examples of farmers trying to write to them, speak to them and urge them to see sense on this. And we're hearing that they're just being ignored. And in the build-up to the election, you know, the Labour Party did a really good job of courting the countryside. Now, I brought it up in my speech yesterday.
Keir Starmer went as far as to go to the NFU's conference, the National Farmers Union conference, in December, I think, of 2023, and promised them that they would not ever put up inheritance tax on the farmers. So it was another blatant lie by the farmer harmer.
Yeah, and he also promised to restore the bond of respect between politics and people.
He does talk a lot of cobblers, doesn't he?
Specifically referring to the countryside and the countryside people.
Yeah.
And you look how quickly that's blown up. It just hasn't happened. And what a missed opportunity. What a missed opportunity. But this is all about it, Mike. This is exactly what we need to do. This is why we need to find an end to this. It's almost like a stalemate.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not going to go away. And as I said, farmers are going to get more organised and more determined. These guys are not going to back down.
Yeah. No, I hope not. Mo, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mo Metcalfe-Fisher, External Affairs Director of the Countryside Alliance. I put out a tweet yesterday with that amazing picture of all those tractors. Look at it there. 1,000 of them in Whitehall, literally bringing the nation's capital to a standstill and making the point. And I said, does this look like a government that's in control of its own destiny? And the answer is no, it doesn't, because they don't know what to do. What did Starmer do? He decided to run for it, along with old Angela Rayner. Well, she couldn't run because she was wearing those brothel creeper shoes, to go and meet the King to look at some housing somewhere in the country. What an absolute plank. 0344 499 1000. Lynn in Portsmouth says she loves the show. I laugh out loud at the voice notes. Keep them coming. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:38. I'm Mike Graham. Robin Whitney. Morning, Mike. A llama. No words. I know what you mean. Let's get a voice note from Sam on Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher. Now, love or hate her, if there's one thing that I liked about her, it's this. If any other country started trying to boss them around, boss us around, tell us what we can and we can't do, yeah, her attitude was no, no, no. Whereas with Starmer, it's, I'm so sorry, okay, yeah, we'll do that, absolutely. It'll be the detriment of our people. It doesn't matter, the little people don't matter.
Yeah, I mean, what a contrast. I mean, you couldn't imagine a bigger one, could you? Keir Starmer amazingly decided not to go to a summit today in Paris on AI because I guess maybe it's not far enough away. I don't know. I mean, you can literally go there in a day and come back. Why wouldn't you go? I mean, he's been everywhere in the world. He's run up a bill of 700,000 quid flying around on private jets. Doesn't want to go to Paris. It's weird, isn't it? Meanwhile, in Paris, Emmanuel Macron and that bloke from Germany, Olaf Scholz, are talking about standing up to Donald Trump and waving their swords at him. I don't think he's going to be that worried, to be honest. Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, because the Home Office have released some information to us, would you believe, in which they say that they've smashed their targets with a mass surge in migrant removals. Nearly 19,000 foreign criminals and people with no right to be in the UK have now been removed since the government took office. Let's see, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, 8 months. 19,000 divided by 8 is what? 2 and a bit thousand a month? There's more than that coming on the small boats, isn't there? It seems to me. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well. Sorry to puncture their balloon, as it were, but I mean, 2,500 a month being removed. Yeah, great. Okay, fine. But some of them will probably come straight back again. And I presume that even in these sort of winter days when it's pretty cold and very unpleasant on the channel, there's easily 1,000 or more, or possibly 2,000 people coming in a month anyway, aren't there?
Well, you're right about all of that, but let me just put this out into context, Mike. These are bluff numbers, I'm afraid, because when you talk about returns, the one that we need to look at is what's the enforced returns. And out of that number of 19,000, the enforced returns, they're the ones that we go up and pick up. This is the word that we like to use, deportations, is a little over 5,000. The rest are people who've left on their own accord. They've had enough of being here. They've just decided that they want to go home when they've been picked up. The ones that we're moving out, and the figures are, we only had 4 more flights than last year, only 985 more people in a year, in those 6 months, have been enforced to leave this country. 985. That is just a little over 150 a month since Labour have come into power.
So pretty poor, actually, is what you're saying. And also, frankly, they've identified renamed, redescribed the words deportation. Because if you're leaving of your own accord, you're not really being deported, are you?
No, they've always, to be fair on them, though, they've always used this word enforced returns. They use the word returns. And when we first started researching it and emailing the Home Office, it was all about being slightly confusing because they break it down into those who are foreign national offenders as well. And that's where you've got to look into this. Out of that 985, Mike, an extra 503 were criminals. Yeah. These were people convicted. So we're not talking about the 20,000 asylum seekers that have arrived across the channel since July the 5th when Labour came into power. We've had 20,000 on the boats and only 482 have been sent back or deported, in our words, and returned in their words, who are actually not criminals.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday we had the ludicrous story of the guy from Albania who couldn't be deported because his son doesn't like the idea of eating chicken nuggets that aren't made in Britain. We now today have got an even more ridiculous one, and more serious maybe even, of a paedophile, a Pakistani paedophile, who's a father of several children, jailed for child sex offenders, sex offences I should say, who can't be deported back to Pakistan because it might be harmful to his children, who he doesn't even live with.
I'm offended by this, as I think your listeners will be, and I know that you are, because this is where the European Court of Human Rights, Article 8, protecting the rights of privacy and family life, has gone way beyond the pale. This is why we need to remove ourselves from the ECHR and remove any context of the ECHR from our common law so we can get back to common sense.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely now more obvious than it has ever been. But there's no sign, is there, of that? I mean, we've got Lord Harmer, you know, the friend of Keir Starmer, who thinks that anybody who's outside of Britain is more important than anybody in it. He's more interested in international rights and international law than he is in British law. You know, I don't know what's wrong with these people in Labour government, but he will never, as long as he's Attorney General, allow us to leave the ECHR. It's just not going to happen.
No, and nor will Keir Starmer. He built his life and his career and his reputation on being an international human rights lawyer, of which the ECHR is part and parcel. I'm sure it runs through his veins rather than blood. And that's why he prefers people from Davos rather than Parliament. Yeah. This is the type of individual that when he says we have to respect the private and family life, the key clause of the ECHR, this is not respecting the private and family life of the victims of the criminals. Where is the respect for the private and family life of the victims of this paedophile who should be deported?
Right. Absolutely right. It's a shocking state of affairs. Stephen, very good to talk to you. We've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity. Morning, Mike, says Doug. I'd like to see the Albanian's passport to see if and where he goes on holiday, considering the chicken nugget situation, says Doug. And Tom in Merseyside said, I don't think we need to worry too much about American steel tariffs, as I don't think we're allowed to make steel anymore, let alone export it. Well, there's a good point to be made there, because the government have pulled out of all sorts of deals where we used to be able to actually make steel. Let's get a voice note from Carol.
Hi, Mike. I found the answer to the solution for pensioners to get money. I'm now going to identify as an illegal immigrant so I can come over here and get everything for free, and that'll solve all my money problems and keep me warm this winter. Thank you.
It's not a bad idea, is it? I mean, if this is what the Labour government now thinks, that it's all right for you to identify as a llama, as a wolf, as a sea snail, as a butterfly, as, I don't know, a crow, or indeed as a legal migrant, surely that should be possible to do. You know, these people are living in La La Land. It's like Alice in Wonderland. It's absolutely ridiculous. One here from Bill in Cheshire. Starmer displays zero leadership, but masses of lawyership. This is why he's so hopeless. Lawyers are trained to bend the truth, which is all he does. And Alan in Merseyside says, Labour seem to think if you say sorry, that's OK then. Well, it isn't. Quite right too. And the idea that he's put this woman in charge of being a minister in the Department of Health, who thinks that it's OK if you turn up, you know, dressed as a llama, speaking like a llama, making noises like a llama, spitting even like a llama, you'll be invited in to the A&E and treated, presumably, like a llama. God help us. This is Talk. it's obviously a very horrid situation for everybody. There is some disquiet, is there not, at the very least, about the way that the authorities have handled all of this.
At the moment, I think people here are just in that panicked fight or flight mode. It really is. You're in the lap of the gods. Everybody's on edge. Nobody feels safe.
As you know, where I live is on fire right now. Literally, the entire city of the Pacific Palisades is burning.
Any message from you to Governor Newsom or Karen Bass tonight?
Spend less on hair gel. What can I say to them? Not big admirer of either.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:50. I'm here with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Lucy says, Mike, thank you for your excuse me, for your continued support of the farmers' fight to save their vital industry. Every single one of us is an eater, if not a farmer. Let's remember that every single day. And Howard says, how many vets do the NHS have on duty at any one time? Also, is the treatment for the animals free at the point of use? Waiting times? Thinking it may be cheaper than a local vet. I mean, it may well be. If you know any llamas, just ask them. How it's been for them every time they turn up at A&E. Do they get treated quicker? Do they get put in a special pen? I don't know. Who knows? Will you turn up as a hamster? Ridiculous, isn't it? We're going to talk to Daniel Rubenstein, former advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu right now. Let's have a look, though, at what Donald Trump has said overnight about the Gaza ceasefire situation, because Hamas yesterday came out with perhaps one of their worst ultimatums of all time, saying basically they're going to suspend until further notice the release of any more hostages, despite the deal that they've already done with Israel. Have a look.
I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot of them are dead. I think a lot of the hostages are dead. I think it's a great human tragedy what's happened, how people can be that mean to do.
It is appalling. A lot of things have changed since the release of the 3 hostages at the weekend who looked so ill and emaciated. Many people likened it to being treated in a concentration camp. And so I think Hamas are now running scared, it seems to me. Let's find out what Daniel Rubenstein thinks. Daniel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. This is a kind of a new level now, isn't it? We've seen Hamas absolutely propagandising the release of hostages over the last sort of few weeks. This particular one was perhaps worse than all of them, where they managed to convince one of those being released to ask where his wife and children were, knowing that they'd killed them on October the 7th, 2023. They looked awful. The Israeli government said that they wanted to make sure that all the hostages were actually alive, that they were all being treated properly. And now Hamas have suddenly turned around and gone, well, you know what, we're not going to release any more.
I think President Trump's comments should have been said nearly 500 days ago by every world leader. Instead, we've reached a point where Hamas's invasion and taking of hostages from their beds is somehow normalized, and instead of calling the exchange a ransom payment, we are using the terminology of deal making. But it's not deal making, it's hostage taking and ransom paying. And today is Tuesday. Saturday is 4 days from now. So I would say that President Trump's comments are actually incredibly generous to Hamas to give them 4 more days to hold the 76 hostages who are being tortured, starved, chained, and held underground in dark tunnels. They have not seen the sun for nearly 500 days. It's time to release all of the hostages immediately, and I would expect and hope that every world leader would say the exact same thing so that Hamas and its patrons, Qatar, Turkey, Iran, South Africa, will get the message.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, the situation is untenable, ridiculous. I can't imagine what it must be like for those poor families who are waiting to see whether not only their loved ones are going to come back to them, but they don't even know if they're alive, because Hamas have still refused to say, haven't they?
Hamas has a policy of torturing not just the hostages, but the entire Israeli public. Hamas is broadcasting every week the slow release of emaciated hostages. We saw that the 3 hostages released last Saturday were starving. We're deeply concerned about the remaining 76 hostages. What is their fate? What is their condition? And this is what Hamas is doing to the Israeli public. It's essentially saying, we have your sons. If you want your sons back, you have to release hundreds of convicted Palestinian terrorists from your prison who may take your mother and grandmother hostage next week. This is the choice we're facing. Israel has decided to pay a ransom in order to bring its people home, but it's an incredibly high price. And even then, Hamas continues to drag out the process because it knows that the hostages are its insurance. If the hostages are out of Gaza, then Hamas fears that it has nothing to stop Israel from changing the reality in Gaza without fear of harming the hostages.
Which I guess is why Benjamin Netanyahu, under a lot of criticism from some of the families, just didn't want to go into this place, you know, before now, because he didn't want to give Hamas the kind of, I guess, the ability to set the narrative and to have the initiative. But I was staggered, and I know that we talk about the BBC quite a lot, Daniel, here, and ITV, but Sky yesterday were talking about, you know, Donald Trump's idea that, you know, he wants to turn the Gaza Strip into a sort of Riviera like the North Jersey Shore, and they actually said, believe it or not, in what I couldn't quite, as I say, believe it. They actually said the military wing of Hamas has said that they're not in favour of this particular suggestion, as if they were an ordinary group of people who were worth quoting, as if they weren't anything other than terrorists, as if they weren't anything other than a military organisation. You know, almost as though they were being treated like sort of Sinn Féin or something. It's incredible to me.
Yes, we've reached a reality where there seems to be a middle ground between a terrorist army that is promising to carry out more October 7th massacres until Israel is destroyed, and the state of Israel, which wants to defend itself and its people and live in peace with its neighbors. It's a situation that should have never been allowed to happen. And for President Trump to offer that Gaza could be turned into something like the Riviera, I think is something that many other peoples and countries around the world are probably wondering, why can't our country turn into the Riviera? We haven't invaded and massacred anybody. Why don't you help us turn our country into a global destination? And Trump seems to be the only one with any kind of plan. And I think if people don't like it, they need to say very clearly that the government of Gaza and the people of Gaza need to make peace with their neighbors and their claims. And on this basis, we can build a better future.
Yeah, because otherwise you can only conclude that they would rather continue to be ruled by Hamas, a bloodthirsty, ghastly terrorist death cult, in order to maintain what they loosely regard as their property, which has only been really their property for a little bit over, what 60 years?
Yes, Hamas right now is the government of Gaza. It has been the government of Gaza since 2007. It was the government of Gaza
when it was elected.
And it shouldn't be the government again if we're going to have a better future for Israeli and Palestinian children alike.
I know. It is absolutely shocking. Great to talk to you, though, Daniel. Thank you very much indeed. Daniel Rubenstein there, former advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, talking about the real problems now which are going to face everybody in the Middle East, because the families who are expecting their loved ones to come home this weekend apparently are not going to see that. Donald Trump is threatening sort of, you know, terrible, hard consequences if all the hostages are not released at the weekend. Israel's defence forces are now on high alert for almost anything that might happen over the course of the next few days. So we don't really know. We're sort of back to square one, really. But I'm sorry, I cannot see any way forward for these people in Palestine, any way that they can live peacefully next to Israel as long as Hamas are in charge. It's just sickening. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Good morning, Mike. It's Chris in Northants here. Enjoying the show, but I've got to say, every time I watch now, I feel as though I've slipped into the twilight zone. With this government, we've got a health minister who doesn't know what a woman is, We've got Angela Rayner, who doesn't even recognise her own statements, and is a bit like Mr. Ben, keeps appearing in public in strange outfits. You've got Ed Miliband and good old Jurgen, who are going to reduce our energy bills, but they can't tell us when, and they can't tell us how. Then we've got Rachel Reeves, who identifies as an economist. She thinks that 6 years is a decade. And then we've got old Keir Starmer, who's a bit like young Mr. Grace from Are You Being Served, who keeps getting wheeled out now and again to say, "You're all doing very well."
Brilliant. Chris, fantastic, isn't it? It's true, though. You can't argue with any of that. Good morning, Mike. For today's publicity stunt, says Winifred, will Keir Starmer be taking a pregnancy test? Yeah, probably. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know what he's doing today. He hasn't gone to Paris. I can only assume it's not far enough away, because he loves a bit of travel, doesn't he? Apparently he's going to go to Washington later on this month to see the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. God help us, fixing the foundations. He needs to go, doesn't he? This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, of course, when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. Tim in Southampton says, Mike, on the very day Wes Streeting was announcing that the NHS needs to get rid of the woke madness, they appoint Ashley Dalton as a health minister. Oh, the irony. Quite exactly right. Jane says, put Talk on. What a treat. The comedy act is already on and going. Great. Well, it's not supposed to be a comedy act. This is just me mirroring what's going on inside of government here in Downing Street. You've got a situation where the woman who is now replacing the man who was the minister in the health department, who wanted to kill all pensioners and hoped that they would die, basically, and also was a bit anti-Semitic and racist and misogynistic, and who talks about all manner of things which he shouldn't have done. The woman who's replaced him is apparently someone who thinks that it's okay to identify as a llama. She also says that basically women can have a willy. That's the front page of The Sun this morning. Woolly thinking. maybe Willie thinking would have been better. It's okay to be a llama. I mean, absolutely extraordinary stuff. It rhymes with Starmer, I suppose, so I suppose they're going down the right road. Interestingly enough, the last suggestion was what publicity stunt Keir Starmer going to get up to today. Is he going to have a pregnancy test? You might want to suggest some other things that perhaps he might be wanting to do in order to gain some publicity. One of the things he's going to do is go off to Washington. You know, there's a movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. This is Mr. Starmer Goes to Washington, or Sir Keir Goes to Washington, to try and see what he can get out of Donald Trump. There'll be a lot of handshaking, there'll be a lot of creeping and crawling. Will he take David Lammy with him? Should he? Peter Mandelson had his first day as ambassador to the United States of America yesterday, so he apparently got that job. Also, of course, we'll be talking about Lord Hermer. There are calls for him to resign or be fired by people on his own side because they think he's doing such a bad job, and he really is not someone with the best interests of Britain at heart. Also, we'll be talking about the Pakistani paedophile who can't be deported. Why? Because it might harm his own children, who he doesn't live with, obviously, because he's a paedophile. Brilliant. This is on top of the story yesterday about the chicken nuggets. What is going on? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, Gen Z aren't proud to be British, and they certainly wouldn't fight for their own country. Really? I mean, who's not sick to death of these bozos? You know, get out of bed, get to work, stop working from home, do something decent for a living, start making some money, paying some tax, and then maybe we'll listen to what you've got to say, you little mealy-mouthed wallies. I almost said the wrong word there. 0344 499 1000. 5 minutes past 8. Let's hear from James on Labour.
I mean, it's only Tuesday. What on earth is going on? I mean, he's off doing HIV tests on Sir Keir. I mean, then he hot-foots in and sees the King, and his deputy leader turns up wearing Herman Munster's shoes. I mean, what's she doing? What's she doing? It's just, what is going on? What the hell's going on, Mike?
James, you, like me, are asking the right questions, but, you know, are we going to get any answers? Here we are. There's Angela Rayner with the old clodhoppers on and that ridiculous green coat. It looks like she stole from somebody that put it on the back of a llama. It looks like something you'd put a horse in, doesn't it? 0344 499 1000. Is she running in the Derby this year? This is Talk. Funnily enough, you know, maybe what we should do is put Keir Starmer in the back end of a pantomime llama. I don't know if they have such things. I mean, a pantomime horse you could be the back end of, but we'll talk to Ryan Saby about that in a moment. How about this? Here's one from Bill in Cheshire. If the Tories used to score own goals every week, this lot of Labour clowns seem to score own goals every day. What does this Morgan McNutcase do all day? I've been a voter for 50-plus years, and I've never seen a government like this before. It's unreal in its stupidity and lack of focus. I can't disagree with you, Bill. I absolutely can't. I don't know the answer to what Morgan McNutcase does. Morgan McSweeney, of course, is his real name. He's supposed to be some kind of boy genius. You can imagine him there with the controls. You know, you've got one of those, you know, those things they had during the war, you know, where they've got like a map of Britain and Europe, and they've got sort of, you know, like poker chips sort of pushing them all around the place. Have they got, you know, all of that for Keir Starmer? There's Angela Ray. Where's she going today? Oh, she's going down to see the King. Right. She's represented by a big pair of big clodhopper shoes. You know, Starmer represented by, I don't know, the man in the bowler hat or something like that, the racing car. I mean, who's that? Is that Rachel Reeves? She's been very quiet this week, actually. Let's talk to Ryan Saby, Deputy Police Editor at The Sun, to find out what is going on behind the scenes. Ryan, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mike.
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about this morning. We're going to talk to Noah Hoffman a little while, who wrote your front page story today about the llama situation. So we'll leave that to one side for the moment. Keir Starmer now told that he can come to America. So presumably he'll be planning that. He didn't go to this AI conference in Paris today, presumably because I said it's not far enough away. It looks as though he's going to try not to sort of side with Europe over the steel tariffs. So when he does go to America, what, if anything, is he going to achieve, do you think?
Yeah, I think this will be. I think he will try and secure the first European leader to go to the White House since Trump gets in. I think one of the things that he will try and achieve is, if it hasn't sorted out by then, is trying to sort some sort of carve out on the trade tariffs. It looks like that needs to be sorted as soon as possible. I was at an event last night with Rachel Reeves, and she seems to think that a deal can be done of some sort. So I think, as well as trying to make sure the trade relationship is as good as it can be, I think it will just be trying to cement that relationship where Sakir is sort of stuck between two places a little bit. He obviously wants to keep America very, very close, but then he's looking at this reset moment with the European Union. So I think he's trying to ride two horses here, and it'd be interesting to see where he falls, or if he just slips through the cracks in the middle.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because, I mean, Macron and Olaf Scholz are apparently talking about, presenting a united front against the tariffs and saying that, if he wants to put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on him, blah, 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 blah. But Trump said before, they don't buy any of our cars, they don't take any of our stuff. There's a $350 billion trade deficit between the United States and Europe. He won't give us stuff if they start putting tariffs on American goods, will he?
No, I don't think, and I also think that I just get the mood within government is that this government doesn't really want to get into a tit-for-tat retaliatory war with America. And I think people in government yesterday, I wouldn't say they were playing down the steel and aluminium sector with America, but it only makes up around 5 or 6% of the sort of total exports around the world. So as much as an important market it is for us going to America when it comes to that steel and aluminium sector, it's not make or break, and I just don't think that that Sakir will want to sort of go in for that retaliatory measures, despite those big warnings from the unions today saying that obviously there's big risk of job losses.
Yeah, sure. How was Rachel from Accounts last night when you saw her? Because the last time we saw her in the Houses of Parliament, or the House of Commons, last Prime Minister's question, she was looking pretty sort of strained. Let me put it that way.
Oh, last night she was looking. It was a very sort of different feel to it. So it wasn't the heated sort of environment of the House of Commons. It was an event with the comedian Matt Ford in the West End, and although there were some serious points, there were some sort of very, very sort of light-hearted moments as well. And I think that the key sort of news line to come out from that was the fact that she, as I said, that she does feel like a deal can be struck on tariffs with the US, just to make sure that the sector here isn't punished as much. And one thing that I thought was interesting that they're very aware of at the moment, the people at the top of Labour, is the threat from reform. And she did make the point that if they don't deliver on their key manifesto pledges, they will be kicked out. Right. So they are fully aware that they have got 5 years to turn things around.
Well, this is it. I mean, reform seems to be making an awful lot of the ground in all places that you look at the moment. I mean, Daily Telegraph this morning has got an interview with Kemi Badenoch saying the Farage deal is for the birds. But, I mean, this is one of the stories that is one of those great inventions, isn't it, by the press? And I don't mean to in any way diss the press, but Nigel Farage has said he doesn't want to do a deal with the Tories. The Tories are saying they don't want to do a deal with Nigel Farage. I don't understand why people are still talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that is on the horizon, that when push comes to shove, and if Kemi Badenoch or Nigel Farage want to get into power next time round, there is going to have to be some kind of pact struck between them. Otherwise, they're just going to let Labour achieve that second term. I just can't see any way around that. And the way the electoral sort of the opinion polls are at the moment, it seems that Labour may well have to do a deal with the Liberal Democrats. So instead of having this sort of traditional Labour versus Conservative battle, it's very much going to be a left v right election. We're a long way off from that, and I think all political parties have to hold the line at the moment. They can't keep talking about getting into deals, but come up close to the time. Let's wait and see what they actually do when they realise that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did say that to Richard Tice yesterday. I said, it's all very well you sitting here and telling me it's not going to happen, but politicians say things are not going to happen all the time, and then they happen. Yeah, no, exactly, and we look into the 2010 election with David Cameron and the Lib Dems. I can't remember too much talk about coalitions and what have you before then, but when push comes to shove and you look at the numbers and you have to try and get legislation through the House of Commons and you are short of a majority,
you have to look for somewhere else if you want to form that government. And let's just see what happens on that.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen this week Andrew Gwynn, government minister, and Oliver Ryan, a sort of backbench Labour MP youngster, both being suspended by the Labour Party. There's calls this morning from a group called the Blue Labour Group that Lord Hermer should be the next one to fall on his sword. I mean, I've been saying for a while that this guy looks to me like he's in the firing line. He's a mate of Keir Starmer's. He was appointed as a sort of, you know, crony of Keir Starmer's, you know, a lawyer that he's known for many, many years. But he appears to be a guy who represents many people who have got it in for Britain. He's been painted by Lord Glassman of the Blue Labour Group as arrogant and a progressive fool, calling for him to be sacked. I mean, he's a liability, I think, to Keir Starmer. He's previously represented people like Shamima Begum, Jerry Adams. He's also advised Caribbean countries seeking trillions of pounds in slavery reparations. I mean, he's also been involved in the Chagos Islands deal with Mauritius, helping them to sort of understand how they can get the Chagos Islands off of Britain. I mean, he's a ridiculous appointment. I'm not sure how much longer he can last. What do you think?
Well, I think sometimes politicians, you know, when they get into government, they just become this lightning rod for all the anger and all the problems within government. And you just outline a couple of some examples there and decisions that Lord Hermer has been involved with. And it's not only the issues such as the Chagos Islands, whether it's representing previously Jerry Adams having to recuse himself from certain decisions. There's also the fear that many ministers feel that with his sort of legal opinion, sort of obviously being tagged along to decisions, that he's actually holding up government business, and that they almost feel like there's a freeze on them trying to get their sort of big policies through. This is a government that is in a hurry to get things done, and if you've got lawyers looking over your shoulder every which way and they're trying to move things on, it can get frustrating. But there has been such a lot of negative briefing towards him. Very, very staunch ally of the Prime Minister. We had the dreaded words from the Prime Minister's official spokesman yesterday that the Prime Minister has full confidence in Lord Hermer. Right. So it's like the football managers, right, who just wonder how long he has got. But I don't think Sir Keir will try and move him unless he really, really has to be honest. I
mean, presumably that's what he said about Tulip Siddiq, didn't he, just before Christmas, and then it turned out that he had to let her go basically in January. Meanwhile, some good news, at least for MPs, they're going to get another pay rise. Above inflation, they're going up to nearly £94,000. I mean, I seem to remember, and it may just be because I'm ancient now, that when MPs got paid about 65, 70,000 quid, they've been going up by a factor of about 5 to sort of 7% on a regular basis now for a good 10 or 15 years, haven't they?
Yeah, there seems to be some sort of there was a kind of realignment a few years ago where they got a bit of a jump, and obviously over the last few years with inflation running quite high, there was that big increase. But this seems to be just above inflation. I think it's 2.8%, taking up to just shy of £94,000. I see some comments around this morning that people think that their pay should be index linked to the country's economic performance. This is always a difficult one because you want to try to attract the brightest and the best people to politics, and you have to pay them. But there also has to be a balance between what they're really worth and the sort of time they put into the job and what they actually achieve, not only for the country but also for their constituents. So to give the MPs their due, that this is set by an independent body, so they don't actually have anything to do. That's what they all say,
but it's an independent body that basically they set up, isn't it?
Yeah, effectively in the wake of the expenses.
It's like me saying I've got this accountant over here who's an independent arbiter of whether I should get a pay rise or not, and every year he's just going to give me one.
Yeah, this was set up in the wake of the expenses scandal, to try and get a fairer system. And again, I think they just try and strike that balance between sort of getting good people to serve as MPs. But I think one of the things is that there's several different roles in Parliament, whether it's being on a select committee, being a select committee chairman. Then there's obviously you can be a minister as well if you're if you get chosen by the Prime Minister. And perhaps there just needs to be a bit more of a staggered pay scale to actually try and attract more people, because some people can be, I hear it from MPs, they've been around for a long time. It feels like for them there's no career progression. Now, I'm not getting the violins out for the MPs, but we do have to try and keep the best people, actually trying to attract people into...
Well, you say that, but I mean, I couldn't name anybody in the government currently that I would describe as the brightest and the best at anything. Would you?
Well, I'll have to deal with them every day, Mike, so I'll leave that one to you.
I know you've got to work with these guys, so I don't want to put you in a bad place. But, I mean, I'm told, literally looking at the stats here, their annual pay has risen by £20,000 over the past 10 years. I think most people listening to that this morning on this show will say, blimey, that would pretty much, double my salary. In a lot of cases, or it would certainly add a third to it if you're making a reasonable amount of money. I mean, it's a lot of money, £93,904 a year. That's before you start putting in your expenses for the pens, for the paper clips, for the television, for the heating allowance at your second home. These guys are living pretty bloody well, actually.
Yeah, and also I think the fact that sometimes when they have had these pay rises, some MPs have decided not to accept it, and I think this actually goes through on a vote, so MPs have to vote for it, or it goes through on the nod.
Yeah.
They could always turn around and say that we don't want to accept this, and we actually do want to feel more in tune with our constituents. It'd be interesting to see how many people actually do that.
Well, indeed, and also it's another great draw on the taxpayers' cash fund, which apparently there isn't much of. So, but they've managed to find some money to pay themselves a bucket load of money. I mean, there's 650 MPs times a few thousand quid is going to be quite a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it sort of adds up. And then on the flip side of that, you've got some voices out this morning saying, people who represent those people who are not getting their winter fuel allowance, have not received that over the winter, and say, look, this really shows where the MP's priorities lie. So I think there's sometimes sometimes it's the way it's presented that just it leaves a bad smell around, actually, on this.
It does. I think it does. It's not a good time to be doing it, to be honest, when everybody's now having to be facing bigger tax burdens and huge increases in the way the government reaches into their pocket, basically. Good to talk to you, Ryan. Thanks very much indeed. Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, of course. 58 million quid, is that right? 90. Well, that's for what they're actually getting. So for £90,000 plus times 650 MPs. So the annual bill for the MP salaries is £58.5 million. But just the rise in itself is worth over £1 million. I think it's about £1.5 million. It's nice, all right for some, isn't it? Very nice too. By the way, Jackie Smith's doing the rounds. She, of course, is the Minister for, what is she? Skills. She's not coming on here. Funnily enough. She's apparently told Times Radio that there are not enough construction workers to build the 300,000 new homes a year the government has promised. So they won't be building them then. No. And apparently she can't say when they'll be able to reach that target. So it's another lie then, isn't it? I mean, I said this. I said, you haven't got any construction workers, there aren't enough people. Maybe they'll decide to import a few of them from Angola or somewhere. Let's get a voice note from Lisa.
Morning, Mike. It's Lisa from Canterbury. Surely if you're going to identify as a llama or any other animal, that's absolutely fine, but shouldn't they be told to go to the vet? Just my thought for the morning. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, you don't have to worry about where you live, because you can just live in a field, can't you? Don't need any houses. I mean, maybe that would be the answer for everything. Just get everybody to identify as a llama and you just run around the countryside. No problem at all. 22 minutes past 8. This is Talk.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8 to 25. We're here until 10 o'clock, of course, when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. The sun is supposedly up. I mean, it normally is at this time, but, you know, I can't really see anything. It's even more glum and grim than it was yesterday. Where's spring? I mean, I know it's only February, but, you know, I'm entitled to ask the question, aren't I? It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Pete the Mole says, this government are like the cast of Dad's Army, only Dad's Army were funny. And Sean says, Mike, instead of an HIV test for Keith Starling, I'd be more interested in a lie detector test. The machine would go into meltdown. I don't know what it is about calling him Keith Starling that just makes me laugh. Absolutely incredible. He made it onto Plank of the Week last week. He makes it onto Plank of the Week every week. We just can't give him it every week because that would be unfair on everybody else. Let's get a voice note from Judith on Angela Rayner's outfit.
Hello, it's Judy from Altofts, West Yorkshire. Do you think Angela Rayner's taken to wearing those brothel creepers so Sir Keir won't hear her when she's on manoeuvres after his job when he finally falls on his sword? As for that big green coat she's wearing, I think her mother's bought it for her. Because can you remember when your mother used to buy you clothes and they were always too big for you? Because they had to last you. And you would grow into them. Well, I think her mother probably thinks she's going to grow some more. Thank you.
Judith, brilliant. Haven't heard from you for a while. Thank you for that. Inspired. Absolutely brilliant. It is a bit of an odd outfit to meet the king in, isn't it? Let's talk to Noah Hoffman, political correspondent at The Sun. Noah, very good morning to you. You've got the front page this morning, a great front page. It's okay to identify as a llama. This is Ashley Dalton, who I must confess I'd never heard of until yesterday. You might obviously know her better than I do. She also thinks it's okay for women to have a willy, it says here. And basically, she seems to have come from a slightly, shall we say, woke part of the Labour Party to do this job.
Yeah, I think, I mean, wokeness aside, our front page is very funny. It's very striking, and we can all laugh at her ridiculous, absurd statement that one can identify as a Peruvian mammal. But there is a more serious side to this, which is about the protection of women and women's spaces. Yeah. Because Ashley Dalton has said multiple times that, you know, that a woman can have a penis. She wants to ban female-only toilets. Now, she's the Minister for Public Health, and this is a huge public health issue. Right. So it is, you know, I will definitely join in the laughter about her saying that you can identify as South American wildlife. It is ridiculous and it's funny. But there is a more serious point about the implications that her views have within her role as a public health minister.
Yeah, also, does it not kind of illustrate, if you like, the paucity of talent that Keir Starmer's got? You know, he's got rid of one guy, Andrew Gwynn, who thought it was a good idea to tell pensioners that, you know, he hoped they would die before the next election, who was anti-Semitic and some of the things that he wrote on WhatsApp group. He was racist. He was a pretty nasty piece of work all round. And this is the replacement. I mean, it's hardly a step in the right direction, is it?
No, it's definitely not. And it is a bit surprising because within the new 2024 intake of Labour MPs, there are, you know, I mean, I know you're not Labour's biggest fan, Mike, but there are a crop of individuals who have, you know, pretty sound views. They're much more centrist than some of the more far left wokerati in the party, and there are some rising talent in the midst. You might not see them yet, but they're sort of coming out their shell and learning the ways of Parliament. There were options available. So what really baffles me is why he went for this woman who clearly had a very long history of saying absurd statements, and statements that, quite frankly, Keir Starmer has spent months trying to distance his party from. We've seen him really toughen up his stance on what a woman is. Not that that should even require, practice, but practice he had. Labour sort of worked out its line on this whole issue, and then they fire one wrong-un and bring in maybe not so much a wrong-un, but someone with just these absurd views that we look to the US, and Donald Trump has almost won an election on saying, I've had enough of people saying these kinds of things. Why Labour thought this was a good idea is just beyond comprehension.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And he came in and he swept them all aside, hasn't he? He's just going, that's not happening anymore. You're all out. He's locking people out of government buildings, saying, sorry, we're not going to have anybody in here who thinks that DEI is a good idea. And I'm not, I must admit, you may think I'm anti-Labour. I'm not actually. I'm just anti-hypocrisy. I was anti the Tories when they were hypocrites as well. And if I find a good Labour MP, I'll get behind them and support them. John Healey, for me, the Defence Minister, is actually the one guy who has made a decent statement in the House of Commons in the 6 or 7 months that Labour have been in, when he identified the Russian ship that was in the Channel, and he gave them a warning, a very stern warning, and said, we see you, we know what you're doing, cut it out, or else there's going to be a problem. John Healey's the kind of guy that I would get behind and say he's actually a sensible and an authoritative individual, but there's not many of them, I'm afraid.
Absolutely, but there are some sort of, perhaps you could call them John Healey's in the making, who do exist. They are there. I've met them. So why you would opt for this woman who is encouraging people to take those who identify as a llama seriously over the crop of people who actually are, trying to paint themselves as the serious arm of the Labour Party, or the up-and-coming sort of Blairites who want to be taken very seriously and look more sort of ministerial. Why you would opt for this woman is just very confusing.
Well, I guess when she looks at Angela Rayner as her inspiration, she'll make that connection and go, well, if she can walk around wearing a coat that looks like it's too big for her, as Judith, our voice noter, said, looks like her mother bought it for her, and a pair of brothel creepers to meet the king, I guess, the standards and the bar are pretty low.
Oh, Mike, I'm a girl's girl. I'm not gonna criticise Angela Rayner's fashion choices.
You don't have to agree with me. No, it's fine. Let's talk about Leo McKinstry's column this morning in The Sun on page 12. Labour's cynical and deceitful bid to take on reform. We were just talking about this a little bit with Ryan Saby. Reform is the flavour of the month right now. It's top of the polls. It's way far ahead of the Conservatives. Now far ahead of, or a little bit further ahead of Labour as well. And basically Leo's saying that this is a bit of a mission which is destined to fail, because they're trying to paint Reform as this kind of, crazy far-right organisation full of crazy people and nutters and nutcases, when in fact they're more or less trying now to tell us that their migration policy is going to be identical.
Yeah, so it is a huge mistake for any politician to write off supporters of Nigel Farage or Reform as, racist or thick or any sort of other incendiary remark. You could not have a more stupid strategy in trying to win over Reform voters than disregarding them as racist or any other insult. These are, hardworking people, patriotic people who are seeing the impact of illegal migration on their society and saying enough is enough. Now, Labour has finally realised that the tactic for winning back these voters, and there is this huge crossover between Labour and Reform voters. In the Venn diagram's actually quite big. Labour has now clocked onto that, and instead of insulting Reform voters, they're actually trying to replicate some of the rhetoric. However, if your strategy for tackling small boats is smashing the gangs, which so far really just has not worked, and that is the expert advice, is that it's a nice idea, but in and of itself, it won't be enough. They aren't going to win over these reform voters. What the reform voters will want to see is results. And just having that strategy of tackling the gangs rather than having a deterrent of some description, that's not going to be enough. So they can put out all the ads they want. They can try and replicate reform rhetoric as much as they want. But at the end of the day, people will be looking at those Home Office statistics that come out weekly, that come out monthly in terms of crossings, and they will make that judgment for themselves.
Yeah, and at the moment, the immigration policy which they're trying to sell us is, perhaps doing better than they thought it would be doing, but it's not quite doing what it should be doing.
Yeah, so it's worth giving Labour some credit where it's due. And what they've really wanted to sort of get out to the public is that there has been a huge spike in deportation flights, over 16,000 people. The party's really keen for that message to get across. But, every day at The Sun, we are keeping an eye on the small boat crossing statistics. They really are not coming down at all. I think we've had already over 1,000 in 2025. So, deportation flights are great, but if those people are just going to be replaced with more people who are coming across the channel, then what is the point? So we're going to have to see some real major changes soon if Labour's sort of metamorphosis into some kind of reform light or reform left-wing version is going to work. We're going to have to see better results.
Absolutely. No, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Noah Hoffman, their political correspondent at The Sun. Leah McKinstry's piece in The Sun on page 12 this morning, on the leader page, basically. Labour's cynical and deceitful bid to take on reform. He's not having any of it, and nobody really believes the Labour government is going to have a success on the migration front, do they? It's 8:35. This from Janice on the 50th anniversary of Margaret Thatcher taking over the Conservative Party in 1975. Janice in Perth says, under Thatcher, my husband and myself went straight into jobs in London when we left school. No university for us, council house lot. By the time we were 21, we'd worked hard and saved to buy our first home. Our son was born in the Thatcher years with great health care. We've really never had it so good since then. Great show. Fast forward to 2025. Starmer the farmer harmer hires a woman who thinks we're all llamas. Yeah, absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from Kevin.
Order, order. Prime Minister, why have you got a llama on the front bench?
It's my health minister, Deputy Speaker. My health minister.
Yes. Fixing the foundations with llamas. Margaret says, morning Mike, Tim Keir should take his lawyer hat off and be the Prime Minister, which he gets paid for, and the money these sacked MPs will get is unbelievable. That's Margaret in Birmingham. It is ridiculous, isn't it, what is going on right now in this particular country of ours. Elle in Wales says, Jackie Smith, when it's Minister for Skills, she's identified the problem we all knew before it was said, that we don't have enough construction workers to build the promised houses. Yeah, I suppose that's a skill. Yeah, disappointment minister. I think they should have one of those, shouldn't they? Minister for what we're not actually going to do, even though we promised to do it. I can nominate one or two people for that too. It's 8:37.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:39. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course, when it's time for Julie Hartley-Brewer. Billy says, hi, Mike. John Healey is the only good minister on the Labour front bench, except for the fact that he entirely lets himself down by defending the Chagos betrayal. This is disqualifying, as it should be a resigning matter if he had any integrity. Yeah, well, nobody resigns anymore, do they? The Chagos betrayal is, of course, something which has been entirely hatched by David Lammy and Keir Starmer because of their obsession with international human rights laws and all that sort of cobblers. Good morning, Mike, says Ray. When we were kids and skin, our mum couldn't afford a quilt, as it was known in those days, so to keep us warm at night, we had an old army overcoat which mum would put over the bed. I often wondered what happened to that coat, and then, lo and behold, I put on the TV yesterday, and there it was. Angela Rayner was wearing it. Absolutely right. I have to say, I thought it went well with the orthopaedic boots. That is what they look like, isn't it? And one from Kerry, who said, morning, Mike. With these deportation flights being shown off by Labour, why are there no human rights lawyers stopping the flights like when the Conservatives tried it? Is it possible that the lawyers were Labour stooges obfuscating the Conservative government and the people's will to see migrants sent to Rwanda? I wonder. That's another chin-stroking moment, isn't it? How could that be? Where have they all gone? All the lefty lawyers who used to stop the flights, all the people that used to sit on the floor to stop the vans from leaving where the hotels were. Where have they all gone? Yeah, they've all been elected as Labour MPs. That's what's happened. Let's talk to Rebecca Ryan, campaign director of Defund the Police. Defund the BBC. I don't know why I said that. You might as well defund the police while you're at it, by the way. Anyway, listen, Rebecca, a very good morning to you. It seems as though rather than taking the bull by the horns and actually thinking about reforming the BBC, they've decided to have another crackdown on people who don't pay the licence fee. What is going on?
Oh, it's just outrageous, isn't it? They've increased the amount of bullying letters they send out from 36 million to, I think, 41 million. Yeah. And the thing that's so outrageous about these letters, I mean, one of the things is that it's licence fee payers that are funding these letters to go out bullying, other people. Right. And these are, I don't know if you've seen them, obviously you just showed one briefly there, but they're very, very threatening. And when you get a letter through that looks official like that and it's got a big red heading on it, people get scared, and it's threatening them with £1,000 fine. Now that puts, the fear of God into a lot of people. It does. Because they're living sort of, month to month, and they can't afford £1,000. And the thing is about these letters, okay, is that they don't set out explicitly what you can watch without a TV licence. So they're
I think they like keeping it vague, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. They keep it very vague so people don't really know. But actually, you can set out very clearly, as long as you're only watching on demand, excluding BBC iPlayer, you don't need a TV licence. So what the BBC is really doing is bullying and intimidating people, using licence fee payers' money to bully and intimidate other people into thinking, I'm not sure, I better just pay it. Yeah. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Sir John Hayes, former Security Minister, and John Whittingdale, former Culture Secretary, have now said and come out and been public about it, saying the licence fee is no longer fit for purpose in the face of competition from all of these streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime and Disney. They're right, aren't they?
Absolutely, and they came out and they were back into a report that we put out at the start of this week, which basically says, what we've all known for a long time, which is it's time for the BBC to just stand on its own 2 feet financially, stop bullying people, stop intimidating people, stop being vague and opaque about what you can and can't watch, and just go over to a subscription service, because for one thing, it's not right that they're bullying people, but the other thing is that if they want to continue, then now's the time. There's a window of opportunity where they can sort of give Netflix and the others a run for their money, but soon that window of opportunity will close. Yeah. They're getting left behind, so they need to do it now.
Yeah, they really should, because, I mean, how much longer are we supposed to put up with this? But isn't it 2027 that the next opportunity for the licence fee charter to be kind of rediscussed, if you like?
Exactly. So we're a mid-term review at the moment, and 2027 would be the next full term of the renegotiation. So it's the problem we have is that government after government just kicks this into the long grass because they think that they want to keep chummy with the BBC, don't they? They wouldn't to upset them in case they say something nasty. But I think it's only Reform who are actually saying that they would get rid of the TV licence, and it would be good to see Kemi and her shadow cabinet to make a stand as well and actually a position on getting rid of it.
Yeah, it would definitely be. It's definitely time. Rebecca, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Rebecca Ryan, campaign director from Defund the BBC. Steve says this: wokery works. Starmer now identifies himself as a prime minister. He says, and another Steve says, after Starmer's photo op with an HIV test and being, as he can't say what a woman is, can we look forward to seeing his cervical smear test on TV next live? Well, you never know, right? I mean, if he went into a hospital, they would probably offer to give him one on the basis that, he might have a cervix. Or they might say, are you pregnant? Like they do. I mean, it is absolutely and utterly ridiculous, isn't it? Completely and utterly mad. Yesterday they had an HIV test. Nobody knows why. We don't really have a problem with HIV in this country, so what on earth was he doing publicising it? Charlie's in Derbyshire, wants to talk about Margaret Thatcher. Charlie, very good morning to you.
All right, Mike, how you doing?
Yeah, very well, sir. What can you tell me?
Yeah, well, I was over the moon when Maggie Thatcher come in, because I used to work on the power station contracting, and it was a close job, you know what I mean? The unions run everything. It was just totally crazy. So this giraffe had died at a zoo. So they propose, right, I think we all have to have a half-day strike in sympathy with the giraffe.
Yeah,
because it's died.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it was the same in the newspaper industry before Rupert Murdoch managed to break the chains. I remember the first time I was about to get a byline, which is a big deal. Get your name on a story in a national newspaper. The paper didn't come out because the printers went on strike that night and decided just to walk off the job.
Yeah, we had another one when Lord Mountain, God bless him, this bloke, another one, I think we ought to have a half-day strike in sympathy with Lord Mountbatten.
Right.
And then this other bloke says, well, I'll second that. Then he turned around and says to his mate, who's Lord Mountbatten? He didn't even know who it was.
It was amazing to think back to those days, wasn't it? I mean, were you working in power stations when they had the blackouts and all the power cuts?
No, I was in the Merchant Navy then.
Oh, right, OK.
I went on stations when I was in 76.
OK, all right.
And because in Merchant Navy, you never had none of this madness. And when I come ashore and go on stations, I just thought I'd gone to another universe. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I know. It was extraordinary. I mean, I told my kids this. They can't believe it. It's absolutely right. Charlie, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. 50 years since Margaret Thatcher became leader of the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party's changed quite a bit. The country's changed quite a bit. She came in as a result of the Labour governments which were currently in place before she won the election in 1979. They'd been in charge, I guess, since about 1973, when Ted Heath had been forced out by the unions because he went to the country and said, it's time to decide who runs the country. Is it me or is it the unions? It turned out everybody thought it was the unions. So he was kicked out. But they used to have these ridiculous blackouts. And my kids are going, so you had what? An hour of electricity in the morning, yeah, so you could have breakfast, and then an hour of electricity in the evening, so you could have dinner. And the rest of the time, there was no heating, there was no lighting, there was no street lights, and we all had candles. And we used to sit around in the kitchen, I remember, arguing. I mean, that's probably what was the best training for this job I could ever have had. But it went on for months and months and months. And I used to go to school one morning a week, Wednesdays. The rest of the time I used to wander about record shops and cycle around Hampstead Heath when it was a bit safer than it is now, frankly. Extraordinary times. And Thatcher changed all of that. She got rid of all of the flying pickets, got rid of all of the mad union bosses, and basically returned Britain to a place where it should have always been, at the top of the economic pile. This lot now are taking it back down the gurgler, because we'll need another Margaret Thatcher by the time Keir Starmer and Rachel Thieves are finished with the economy, won't we? 0344 499 1000. Paul says, if somebody identifies as a llama, stop their benefits. If they work, don't pay them in money, pay them in straw. And see how long their delusion lasts. That's brilliant. Yeah. We're not going to give you any benefits this month. We're just going to drop a bale of hay outside your door and you can eat that, see how you get on. Or you can get a job. Maybe it's the front end of the pantomime llama that Keir Starmer's the back end of. This is Talk.
Today I will sign a series of historic executive orders. We will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We're about to enter the final hour of the show, unbelievably. There still doesn't seem to be much light at the end of the tunnel, or indeed out the window. There is some light, but it's looking a bit murky, it has to be said. Rafe Heidelmann-Koo coming on very shortly to talk about Gen Z and why only 41% of them say they're proud to be British, against 80% in 2004. Let's get a voice note from Nick.
Mike, Noah Hoffman suggests that Labour get their act together regarding immigration. They can combat reform. This isn't the case. People aren't voting for reform just to curb immigration. They're sick and tired of the establishment parties. They're sick and tired of the way politics has been done for generations, and they want to change. They want to break the two-party system.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They're also sick and tired of being lied to, I think, Nick, as well. That is the point, is it not? You're absolutely right. Even today, Labour Party's press release from the Home Office, which says Home Office smashes targets with mass surge in migrant removals, it doesn't quite tell the same story once you read into the detail of it, I'm afraid. But let's talk to Rafe Heidelmann-Koo, because the story on the front page of the Times today, half a generation Z think Britain is a racist country, and just 1 in 10 would risk their lives to defend it in a war. Rafe knows a thing or two about this story. Let's get his view. Rafe, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you, Rafe. This, I suppose, won't come as a great surprise to an awful lot of people, because, in a way, most of these 18 to 27-year-olds can't really be blamed for having this view, because they've been taught it pretty much all their lives, right?
Exactly. I mean, they've been indoctrinated to essentially despise all the stuff that we used to love growing up. So love of nation has become national self-loathing now. And this is deeply serious. You know, we talk about immigration a lot in the media, but this, I think, is just as important for the future of this country. Yeah. Immigration is changing our country fundamentally, but the fact that the youth of this country are more radically left-wing than at any other point in history, and are not becoming more conservative or more balanced as they grow up, should concern us all, because they are actually being indoctrinated to hate their country. And it's no surprise, of course, because they're taught from primary school. They first hear about terms like white privilege and systemic racism and patriarchy and so forth. They're never taught the good side, for example, of the British Empire, only the negative side. And of course, they're only getting, they can leave school at the age of, they can stop learning history at the age of 14, whereas it's 16 in the continent of Europe. Yeah. And so our children are leaving school hugely ignorant of Britain's past, hugely ignorant of the great achievements that we've made in this country. And that makes them susceptible to the fake history that permeates in popular culture on TikTok and elsewhere, because they're not equipped to know that what they're hearing is nonsense. Yeah. That's why they hear that Churchill is racist, all our heroes are somehow linked to slavery. And it's just also, of course, the fact is our youth have the biggest proportion of ethnic minorities amongst any generation, and they're being indoctrinated with the politics of victimhood, that they are somehow oppressed.
It is extraordinary. I mean, I've had the privilege in the last sort of few months of being able to visit a couple of the clubs of London. You probably know them well, like the East India Club and the In-N-Out Club and the Carlton Club. And these are places now that seem to be almost relics of the past, but not in a bad way. I mean, they're beautiful buildings in the centre of London, terribly well kept, full of incredible historic monuments, historic paintings. I think the one painting I noticed in the East India Club was a portrait of Winston Churchill in overalls, which was obviously done during the war. Just the history of what Britain is great at, cricketing kind of memorabilia, all of this stuff that you don't really see in common everyday experiences anymore.
Yeah, absolutely right. They are. I mean, I go to them all the time. And it's where I go as my safe space. When the world outside is mad and crazy, it's where I go. And you can see the nonsense that's here. For example, we know that half of British youth think Britain is racist. In fact, if you ask British youth what the #1 issue is in this country, it's not climate change or Brexit, it's racism. Yeah. This is despite the fact that Britain consistently ranks as the 3rd least racist nation in the world, behind Brazil and Sweden. I mean, the most racist countries like India and places in Africa and Asia and so forth. So what we have are children who have got a completely false reading of the reality of what's happening on the ground. And that's hugely dangerous, because what it means is that in 20 to 30 years, the vast majority of the working age population of this country will have no idea about our history, also will despise and be ashamed of this country. And that's hugely dangerous for a nation. Particularly, of course, we now know that very few youth would ever willingly fight for their country. So what does it actually mean to be British, actually, when the majority of the working age population of this country are ignorant and actually despise their nation?
Absolutely right. And I mean, a lot of people say to me that a possible reason why so many young people now have these views is because an awful lot of them are also from sort of mixed heritage, and that they don't have perhaps a British historical background. Immigration has changed an awful lot of things in this country. Has it also changed the attitude of our young people?
Precisely. That's why I say immigration and the indoctrination of our youth are the two biggest threats that we face. And of course, we have a huge ethnic minority population amongst our youth, and they are having these politics of victimhood and taught to them at school as well as what they're getting at home. You're seeing it in the decolonization of curricula, purging book reading lists of dead male, white, pale and stale authors. So forth. This is ideological subversion, and what it does is it severs the connection between a people and their past. And the communists understood this very well. They said it takes one generation to destabilize a society. It takes 25 years. You denigrate the heroes, you pull down the statues, you tell them that they've never achieved anything in their past, that it was all due to, say, diversity built Britain. All of these new myths are created which have no basis in fact. And that lays the ground for a new ideology to come in, and it affects our own new year zero. And I'm afraid we're heading towards that sort of thing. My family are Polish. They went through all of that after the Second World War. They had the rewriting of their history. New myths were created. The past was disparaged, and this new utopian communist ideal went into play. You may think I'm being overly dramatic. We're actually seeing this cultural revolution, this cultural Marxism, being embedded. The scaffolding for the structure is already erected around us.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great to talk to you, Rafe. Interesting stuff. Rafe Hadel-Mancu there, broadcaster and commentator, on why Gen Z are so unpatriotic and would not want to fight for their country. Unbelievable stuff. We've got loads of great messages still to come for you. We've got MPs coming up in the next hour. We've got loads to go. Margaret Thatcher as well. This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
Time
is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, the final hour of the show. Clayton in Dartford says this morning, Mike, when Ange, Keir and the King were in Cornwall, do you think Ange gave Keir some bath running lessons? I wouldn't be at all surprised. And Paul in Fife says, do we have doctors and nurses working in our hospitals who do not know what a woman is or what a man is? Why are men being asked if they're pregnant? It's insanity. Well, they are, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say that. And Michael says, just did a double take. Starmer, Rayner and the King. I honestly thought it was the Munsters in colour. I don't blame you. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about the craziness of the Pakistani paedophile who can't be deported from his place of worship here in London, or here in England. We can't name him, of course, either, because his privacy is being protected by the law for some bizarre reason. But apparently a tribunal, an immigration tribunal, has ruled that he cannot be deported, despite the fact that he spent time in prison for some pretty horrific paedophile offences, because he has a family. Even though he doesn't live with his own children, it says that the harm that would be caused to his children if he was removed from the country would mean that basically he can't go. And he can stay here for the rest of time, committing as many paedophile offences as he likes. Absolutely and utterly ridiculous, absolute madness. The Labour government, of course, have got nothing to say about it. They keep telling us that they're sending more and more people off the shores of this country. They're deporting more people than ever. Nearly 19,000 foreign criminals and people with no right to be in the UK have now been removed since the government took office. That only makes for about 2,000 and a bit a month, by the way. It's not such a massive number, and in fact, many of those people who are going voluntarily. So it's not as if they're forcing people to leave the country. We know from yesterday that one particular individual can't be sent back to Albania because his son doesn't like the chicken nuggets to get there. We're also going to talk about Lord Hermer, the Attorney General. He's the latest in the firing line inside of Keir Starmer's government. He lost the Health Minister and replaced him, I should say, Andrew Gwynn, with a woman who thinks that you can identify as a llama if you wish, and that women can indeed have a penis. She's going to be a Minister of State in the Department of Health, where people are actually going to get themselves fixed up in hospital. She's going to be part of a crew who decides how they're going to be treated. I'm not sure that thinking you're a llama is the best way to go. We'll talk about that, plus an awful lot more. We just heard from Rafe Heidelmanku about why Gen Zers would not fight for their country, and they don't actually feel proud to be British. They think it's a racist country, which of course is complete and utter bunkum. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. One from KK says, morning, Mike. I'm going to identify as a sheep. When I get ill, then I will get to see a vet immediately. No more waiting weeks to see a doctor. Sorted. Well, I tell you what, it's not a bad idea, but it might, if you haven't got a dog or a cat or a hamster or a snake or a rabbit or a horse or something, it might surprise you to know that vets are a bit expensive. Every time you go there, you don't get away for less than about 200 quid. So it's not exactly free at the point of use, I think you'll find. So you might well want to dress up as a sheep, but it will cost you a few quid to get seen by a veterinarian, I can tell you that. You also might want to stick his arm up your backside, which won't feel very comfortable, to be honest. Matt Vickers is here, MP, of course, Shadow Minister for Crime, Policing and Fire. Matt Vickers, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is going on, Matt? We've now got a health minister who thinks women can have a penis, and it's all right if you want to identify as a Peruvian mammal.
It is utterly balmy. This woman is at the helm of our health service. At least she isn't in schools. I mean, what does it say to the next generation? But the big question, Mike, is if you can identify as a llama, there's all these questions about where you can go to the toilet. Where does a llama go to the toilet? It is utterly
Sounds like a
bonkers.
joke. It sounds like one of those, jokes you're not allowed to tell anymore from the 1970s. But yeah, I mean, but on a serious note, this is now the sort of third person who has had to leave the government. This ghastly individual, Andrew Gwynn, who thinks it's perfectly okay to be completely and utterly disrespectful to his constituents, to the people that voted for him and the people who didn't vote for him. I mean, I'm no great defender of Diane Abbott, but the things he said about her were pretty reprehensible. He was anti-Semitic. He's a misogynist. He seems to think that making fun of gay people's okay as well. But who on earth is vetting these people, if you pardon the expression, before they get into the cabinet or to get into even a lower junior minister level?
Well, the bizarre thing about what Gwynn said, and the thing that makes it more scary is talk about pensioners and their untimely death. Whilst these guys are in office freezing our pensioners to death, my inbox is full of pensioners struggling to make ends meet. People on £11,500 having 300 quid ripped from their hand, while train drivers on £55,000 get a 10 grand bumper payment. It's ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. But this, what we saw the other week is corruption minister investigated for corruption and having to sign. We saw all the carry on with the missing phones and Louise Hay, the transport secretary. It just seems to be stepping from one scandal to the other at the moment.
Yeah, it does seem to be absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And inflation is going to go up soon. You guys will be all right, though, because you've got an inflation-busting pay rise, haven't you? Nearly 94,000 quid you're going to get. I mean, you can, of course, turn it down if there's a vote in Parliament, can't you?
I don't know that we do get a vote in Parliament on it. I didn't know that that's a thing. I'll look into it and I'll come back to you. But actually, when you look at the economy and the worries about inflation, it's the one thing that nobody can avoid. It's the one thing that's going to hit those pensioners and who are struggling with that winter fuel payment. It's the one thing that's going to hit all of those businesses that are struggling to make ends meet. The story that we haven't seen yet. Yesterday we had thousands of tractors here, thousands of farmers who are being hit by this government. The one thing we haven't seen yet is the impact on our high streets, on our community pubs, being hit by that national insurance rise and being hit by the slashing of small business rates relief. Real consequences for communities across the country, for normal, hard-working people who go out there day and night, get up early to earn a living and get through the day. Horrendous consequences of this government. We knew it was coming. It's worse than we thought it was.
It really is worse than we thought it was. And what about what's going on at the heart of government? Because you've got the migrant bill coming up now for its second reading. You've got the Home Office claiming they're smashing targets with a mass surge of migrant removals. They're not being entirely truthful about it because an awful lot of the removals, 19,000 so far since July, are actually voluntary, aren't they?
I think, exactly. I mean, the last government, let's say, it didn't get things right. There were too many people arriving and there was more to be done, and Kemi's conceded that. But actually, things are definitely going the wrong way. However bad they were, they're getting seriously worse. The number of people arriving in small boats is up 28%. Before the election, we were seeing hotels closed for migrants. We've now seen 6,000 more people put into hotels. And actually, when you look at the number of people arriving by small boat and being deported, that number is going down, not up. Yes, we're seeing more people deported, but the number of people being removed on the back of the likes of the Albania agreement that the last government put in place has been going up year on year. The number of people arriving in boats, which is what's concerning lots of people at home, is actually the number of people being removed after arriving on those boats is going down. We're going completely the wrong way under this government. And last night in there we had a debate about Labour's Borders Bill, and what they did before before this legislation came forward. People who arrived here illegally could not go on to become British citizens. That's the right thing to do. Yesterday they unpicked that. People who arrive here illegally, they sent a message to the world: come here illegally, you can be a British citizen and have all the benefits that come with that. It's completely wrong. It's bonkers.
It really is. But let's talk about Kemi Badenoch, because she's done a big interview with the Telegraph today in which she says basically that any deal with the Nigel Farage and the Reform Party is for the birds. I mean, he's already said he doesn't want one. So why are we still talking about it? Why is the Tory party still kind of obsessing about whether or not there should be a pact with Reform when Reform say they don't want it?
I don't think the Tory party are obsessed. I think the journalists out there are obsessed. And you're going to have to ask the people who interviewed why they asked her that. But actually, I think we're in opposition. We're learning the lessons that the public sent us last time. We're putting an offering forward. In fact, there's no better place to have seen it than last night's debate, where you saw what Labour stand for, giving British citizenship to those who arrive illegally, getting rid of age verification, so we can't tell what age people are who arrive here, so they get, huge safeguarding issues for the country. You saw us putting our offering forward, and you didn't see Reform because they didn't come to the debate at all. They didn't speak in the debate.
Well, they were there though. One of your MPs
put an offering forward.
Well, one of your MPs attacked Nigel Farage for not being there, suggesting he was doing a radio show instead, which he wasn't doing. And Rupert Lowe, in fact, was in the debating chamber. So I don't know which Tories were putting around the story that Reform weren't there, but they were.
I was there for 4 or 5 hours. They weren't. They didn't contribute to the debate, but that's aside. It's up to us now to put our offer forward to the British people. That's what we were doing in there last night. We were drawing those very clear lines. At the election, there's going to be a choice between a Labour Party who want to strip the authorities of powers that mean they can verify the age of people who arrive here, who think that illegal immigrants should get the right to a British passport, a British citizenship. We, on the other hand, do not. We're going to toughen it up. If you arrive here, you're going to obey the law. You're going to contribute to society. We're not going to be giving you a passport if you arrive here illegally. We're going to be detaining you and sending you back.
OK. Let me ask you about Generation Z, as they like to be called. These are people aged 18 to 27 who, in a poll published in the Times today, basically say that they don't think Britain is worth fighting for, that they think it's a racist country. Only 1 in 10 would risk their lives to defend it in a war. Only 15% believe the country is united, and a lot more of them think it's stuck in the past. Now, most of these people were educated under Tory rule, under Tory government. The teachers who taught them all this stuff, and now we've got a whole generation of people who have no pride in their country. I mean, surely you guys have got some blame to have for that, shouldn't you?
Well, I always take these polls with a pinch of salt, and you wonder who's paid for it and what they wanted the people to say that they were asking the questions and how the questions were asking.
Well, I think it's a Times poll, so I would suggest to you that it is entirely full of integrity and cannot be questioned.
Of course. But I always, whenever I hear a poll, wonder who commissioned it, what they wanted it to say, and what makes the news, because it wouldn't be very newsworthy if they weren't saying something of consequence. But no, of course we should be concerned about that. We should be concerned that people aren't proud to be British, but we should also be concerned about the absolute garbage that they might be listening to on less than reputable broadcasters. Maybe they're listening to a few of those dodgy channels, maybe they're reading The Guardian a bit too often, and maybe they're paying a bit too much attention to some of the lefties on Twitter.
Yeah, but I don't know if you've got kids, Matt, but you must know that in our schools in this country there is a very definitive, what you might call narrative, which is taught to children, which is a left-wing narrative. I've been told by my children that they've had teachers in the past who've told them not to read the Daily Mail, that they should go out and vote Labour, that they shouldn't absolutely agree with anything that happened during the days of empire, that Margaret Thatcher was the devil. 50 years ago she became the leader of the Conservative Party. It was a much more strong and patriotic party then, I think, than it is now.
Do you know what? I think you're entirely right. I think there are too many examples and instances where we hear about this brainwashing of young people into left-wing ideologies through educational places of education, deeply concerning. We've got to see where that comes about. We've also got this concern about what you are and aren't allowed to do on campus. We saw people cancelled. They prevent certain speakers from appearing on university campuses. All completely wrong. Educational establishments like that should be places that allow freedom of speech, allow actual independent thought, that might be different to that of the lecturer or the teacher. You're entirely right. We've got to do more to create that balance and let young people form their own opinions about the great country that is Britain.
Yeah, their parents should be helping them with that as well. Matt, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Matt Vickers, Shadow Minister for Crime, Policing and, of course, Fire. How about this from Catherine in Bedfordshire? Cathy, I remember the 70s only too well. The Labour government brought the country to its knees, as they're doing right now. Thatcher was an amazing, brave politician, the like of which, sadly, we will never see again. And one from Jackie, who says, I was working at the Old Lady in 1975, but I wasn't an economist. Why doesn't the mainstream media broadcast the same news as talk? Well, because they don't have the sense to do it. They don't have the common sense. This is the world headquarters of common sense. If you listen to us every single day, you will get the news as it should be. Unvarnished, the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, nothing obfuscated, unlike some of other broadcasters I could mention. It's 9:16 now. Let's talk to Michael Fabricant, former Conservative MP. He's quoted in a couple of stories around today about the Tories in a WhatsApp war over how to tackle that threat from reform. Mr. Fabricant, very good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you, Mike?
Yeah, very well indeed. Good to see you. What's going on? I mean, the Tories seem to be obsessed with this pact with reform. And I said to Matt Vickers there, you know, Kemi Badenoch's given an interview to the Telegraph talking about it, but Reform have said, we don't want a pact with the Tories, so why is it still an issue?
Well, we weren't at war. It was a fairly light discussion we were having in WhatsApp. But, you know, prior to 2010, you had all the parties saying quite rightly, you know, we're in this general election to win it. And there was no question of any pact. But of course, when there was the general election, you know, no government, no party had an overall majority, and the Conservatives went into coalition with the Lib Dems, which, I mean, was quite unimaginable before 2010. And of course, Nigel Farage is saying, you know, we don't plan to have a pact with the Tories or anybody else. And of course, Kemi Badenoch, quite rightly, is saying, no, it's for the birds. But all I was saying, actually, was, you know, it's the electorate who will decide. And if no party has overall control, I'd rather have a pact with somebody than have another Labour government.
Well, God save us. I don't think we can last this one out. I mean, people talking about Margaret Thatcher this morning because it's 50 years since she became the leader of the Tory party. And she came in at a time when Labour was destroying the economy back in the 70s. I remember it well, sadly. But we sort of managed to...
It's all being repeated, by the way.
Well, it is. I mean, I'm wondering which figure is going to be the new Margaret Thatcher to take us out of this terrible place that we're being drawn into.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, yesterday, Mike, you had all these 1,500, was it, tractors in the centre of London. I saw them, and we know what they were protesting about. But the interesting thing is, it was originally brought in by Labour, this tax, under Harold Wilson back in the 70s.
Yeah.
Thatcher then stopped the tax. And when Labour got in again with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they did actually look at the tax, but decided, no, we're not going to introduce it. And why? Because they knew it would be damaging to farming. And it's great. You've got a fantastic picture there for those who are watching this on TV of all those tractors in Whitehall.
Yeah.
And, yes, so Tony Blair decided, you know, this left-wing policy would damage agriculture in the UK. We're not going to have it. It is extraordinary that Reeves, who is the most incompetent Chancellor we've ever had, and boring Keir Starmer, have now gone back to having this tax again, which didn't work back in the 70s and drove several farms out of business.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about Lord Hermer, who in my mind is the latest sort of target, shall we say, for dismissal from the Cabinet, because he's the new Attorney General, relatively new. He's definitely a detriment to the country. He seems to like representing people like Shamima Begum, Jerry Adams, some illegal migrants who came in from the Chagos Islands. He's helped the Caribbean countries to have conversations about what reparations they can get out of Britain. He doesn't seem to like Britain very much. And he's already admitted that he's had to recuse himself from several conversations with the government because of a conflict of interest when they ask him for his advice. I mean, you know, he's another one of Starmer's cronies, basically, the man who said cronyism was going to be ended under Labour. What's the point of him?
And in fact, he said even more than that wonderful list that you produced, Mike, because he also said that he thought that borders are immoral. Borders are wrong. We should allow free movement of people anywhere they like. If they're criminals and they want to come to the UK, well, so be it, because borders are morally wrong. And Lord Glassman, who is also a Labour peer, I mean, he said the trouble with Hermer is that he thinks the law in all its theory is more important than practical politics and what people want and the safety of British people. You know, I hate it, you know, when you get broadcasters and media people coming up with cliches, and it's a cliche that Keir Starmer is a sort of North London lawyer, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And this is why he chooses people like Lord Hermer. I mean, it's absolutely gobsmacking. I mean, I can genuinely say I have never, in all my years, he said, clutching his non-existent lapels because he's not wearing a jacket, I have never known a government to come into office so quickly and be so utterly useless and get it so wrong. It's incredible.
I mean, I've been saying it for months, actually. I can't quite believe how incompetent they are. I thought they would do things that we might not like and that, you know, many people in this country wouldn't agree with, and they would take us down the woke road, which they're now sort of trying to row back from because Donald Trump's in. And I knew that their policies wouldn't be great, but they have been completely...
By the way, and Mike, wasn't it incredible that they appoint Peter Mandelson, of all people,
I know,
who is not only loathed by many sensible people in the United Kingdom, he's utterly loathed by the Republican Party, Trump's own party, in the United States. And you choose that man to represent the United Kingdom's interests in Washington. I am praying, just praying, that the head of state of the United States, namely President Trump, does what any head of state can do, and that is say, on this instance, we refuse to accept this person as the ambassador.
But they haven't done it because apparently yesterday was his first day. His pictures are in the paper today. Actually meeting up with the, I think it's the Defence Secretary or somebody. He's actually now officially the ambassador to the United States, which is pretty appalling.
Well, I know Donald Trump watches Talk TV and Talk Radio and listens to Talk Radio. So my challenge to Donald Trump is to say, right, you've got that power, Don. You should stop him and you should get somebody... Why not have Nigel Farage? Mind you, I think Nigel Farage... I think
Nigel's a bit busy.
In the United
I think he's a bit busy trying to become the next Prime Minister, I think, to be fair, which I think he may well manage to do. What's life like for you, Michael, since you've left the hallowed halls of the Palace of Westminster? What are you up to?
Well, somebody was asking me, actually. Somebody was asking me, what do I miss? And I think I missed two things, actually. One is the companionship of lots of friends at the House of Commons. So, in fact, I'm meeting one of them tonight in the House of Commons. So that's nice. I don't go back too often, but once every 4 months or so, I'll meet up with friends. And people like Matt Vickers, who's you've just been interviewing, is a lovely guy. And the other thing I miss is the free parking you get at the House of Commons. That was very convenient.
I bet.
The rest of it, I'm not so sure I miss it that much. And what am I doing? I'm doing a lot more broadcasting, and there's something coming up in the next few months. So you might be seing a bit more of me.
Excellent. Michael, well, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Michael
and lovely to talk to you.
Former Conservative MP. What about that, eh? 94 grand a year, which was a new pay rise, and a free parking. Blimey. I mean, that's worth about another 10 grand a year, I think, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Hi, Mike. Fantastic show, as usual. Tony from Bradford here. Yeah, you know, I just don't know what's going on. You know, we've sent space probes to Mars. We've landed on Mars. We've landed on the moon. We've got the Hubble telescope. Each day we've got AI intelligence. And I had a scan the other day in the doctors, and they asked me if I were pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I used to say this when I did the old show on Talk Sport. You know, we are evolving backwards as a people and as a nation. Morning, fella, says Gareth. I served this country for 33 years. I love this country. I just don't like it. However, I would again fight for it if called to do so. And Tony from near John O'Groat says, Mike, enjoying the programme. In 1975, I was an assistant station manager at Hastings Railway Station. That was when they had such a thing. You know, you now go to a railway station, there's nobody there. There's literally no one. Any chance of a train? I don't know. Any idea? Of course, you know, we told you the story last week that some departure boards are going to become a thing of the past. They're not going to put them up anymore in case it makes you panic and run for the train. Goodness gracious me. It's 9:25.
Unless either that happens or one or other of the parties, Reform or Conservatives, win out, Keir Starmer will continue to govern as long as he wants.
A good majority of 100, if not. Who would be the leader? Loads of Tories don't like Nigel Farage. A lot of people, they're not impressed with Kemi Badenoch. You know, the man you helped his campaign, Robert Jenrick, is he the man? Is he the man to inspire everybody? Who else?
Well, look, here is the thing. Boris Johnson riding as the king overseas, coming back.
I'd vote Labour. I'd vote Labour over that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to nearly 9:29. We're here until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will join us then with her idea of what's coming up on her show from 10 till 1. Paul says this: the BBC sending out threatening letters using licence payers' money to do so is absolutely criminal. You only need a licence to watch live TV on the BBC. Maybe they should claw back the money from Hugh Edwards. Barn pottery in the highest. Defund the BBC. Quite right. And Sarah says, great show as always, Mike. Have Shawaddy Waddy been selling off their wardrobe? Looks like Angela bought some of their shoes, and the coat most definitely got appropriated from some poor shivering horse in a field. Sartorial elegance not. Does her mum trim that fringe with a bowl? It is weird, isn't it? It's very, very bad look. And people say, oh, it's misogynistic to criticise women for what they wear. Well, I criticise everyone for everything. So, you know, I'm a completely non-sexist, non-racist, equal opportunity insulter. I used to have a go at Rishi Sunak for his ridiculous Gucci loafers that he used to wear, and I used to make fun of all manner of people walking up and down Downing Street. So rest assured, there's nothing misogynistic about me. Just ask any of the women that know me, OK? And you'll be fine. But here's something for you, an exciting opportunity, and it's open to men and women and even llamas. Off you go. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
And there you go. Have a go and see what you do. See how you get on. Margaret Thatcher, we've been talking about this morning. Lady Thatcher, I suppose we should give her as a proper moniker. 50 years ago today, she became the leader of the Conservative Party. We're going to speak to Caroline Slowcock in a moment, former private secretary to the former Prime Minister, who, of course, was in the room with her when she resigned as Prime Minister all those years ago. But let's have a look and just remind ourselves, for those of you who've never seen Margaret Thatcher in action, here she is.
Of course, the chairman or the president of the Commission, Mr. Delors, said at press conference the other day that he wanted the European Parliament to be the democratic body of the community, he wanted the Commission to be the executive, and he wanted the Council of Ministers to be the Senate. No, no, no.
I think no would be a very, very good answer to an awful lot of the questions that are currently being asked by all sorts of people, whether they be the European Union, whether they be the American president, whether they be sort of lobbying groups, trade unions, whatever you like. Let's talk to Caroline Slowcock, though, who knew her perhaps better than certainly many people did. Caroline, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. I've been asking people to sort of recall what it was like back in 1975, and I was 15, and you know, I remember it pretty well as a very difficult decade, I suppose. I didn't know any different at the time, but you know, it's hard to explain to my children, for example, just how hopeless and hapless Britain had become by the time Margaret Thatcher took over there in 1975. And so by the time she became Prime Minister in 1979, there was a lot of work that needed to be done to sort of restore Britain to its former glory, really.
Well, certainly, there had been big troubles, including under Ted Heath, where during a miners' strike, we had a 3-day week because there wasn't enough electricity to go around to fuel the country. And
yeah, I remember it. I was telling my children, I said we used to sit around in candlelight every night. We had an hour of electricity in the morning, an hour in the evening. Hard to imagine now, isn't it?
It is, yes. And then there was rubbish in the streets piling up due to strikes, under Callaghan. So, she came in with a mission partly to reduce the power of the unions, which she did with some firmness, it has to be said. And Britain was also in economic decline, and her mission was to put it in contemporary terms, perhaps, make Britain great again. And she had 3 terms, and she made a huge impact on the country in lots of different ways. In fact, to a large degree, the Britain that we live in now was shaped by her. Things like the privatisation of the water industry, privatisation of the railways. These are things which happened under her time, and
but it seemed different then, didn't it? Because when she did it, I remember when BT kind of went public, it was all about people buying into it, wasn't it? In the same way that the council house thing, which now doesn't look such a great idea as it did then, it was about people buying into ownership, wasn't it? So with BT, you could buy shares, and I think a lot of people. I certainly remember I didn't have any money when I was in my early 20s, but there were people who went, oh, I can buy shares in a company. I never thought I could do that, but I thought that was just for rich people and, toffs and people who went to private school, and the same with the Big Bang. My sister got a job in the city, never looked back, The opportunities suddenly became more, and now sort of privatisation now seems to be like a sort of a bad thing, an ugly word, because all it does is it sort of seems to enrich a very small number of people.
Well, I mean, she promised that water would become, there would be more investment in it, which was one of the issues, and that it would become more efficient and effective. And, seeing that actually hasn't happened. But, her kind of philosophy was a property-owning democracy. And there are many people in this country who did buy their own council houses. Consequence, who thank her for it. But, of course, the long-term consequences are more complex than that. Been a decline in social housing, and a lot of those houses that have been sold off have become Airbnbs. Even that.
Right, and so, there wasn't the replacement project that there should have been, perhaps.
No, I mean that may be partly the Treasury's fault for not, setting the rules in ways which allowed that. And I think that those rules have changed over time. Yes, that was part of the problem. But, the thing about Margaret Thatcher, which I think sort of distinguishes her from politicians today, is that she did have a very strong sense of conviction and vision and values. So, one of the things that I think, enabled her to focus on that was that she didn't rush down, as Boris Johnson reportedly did, from the flat to look at the headlines, the newspaper headlines, particularly the Telegraph in his case. She had a digest of those, headlines of all the newspapers, and she read that, but that's all that she read. She didn't do focus groups. She didn't have a kind of spin doctor machine working for her, telling her what to say. So she said what she thought, and she knew what she thought, and she knew what she was trying to do. And that sort of kind of clarity of direction, I think, has rather disappeared from British politics.
Well, right. And presumably she didn't have, as we seem to have now, endless numbers of advisors, special advisors, many of whom would not have been old enough to sort of, shine her shoes.
Yes, I mean, Number 10 was very different then. There were 5 private secretaries, of which I was one, all civil servants, who were the kind of centre of Number 10. And the principal private secretary ran Number 10. There was no chief of staff. There were about 14 policy advisors, and now there are hundreds, I think. Who were largely political appointments, but not exclusively. And there was one political secretary and one parliamentary private secretary. So the place, it was about 100 people in total, many of whom were people like messengers, people who made the tea, that sort of thing, who probably won't be there anymore.
No.
And now it's about 300 in size. So, and that that expansion happened under Tony Blair, and it's continued, and it's actually, I think, in some ways weakened prime ministers because they get embroiled in all sorts of detail, which they didn't in the past.
Right.
And they lose that sense of clarity about, being really a kind of lodestar to guide the rest of government, being clear about what you want. And I think the other thing is that she was actually very good at governing, not just campaigning. And I think a lot of politicians, it's the hallmark of some of the previous Conservative administrations, that they were better at campaigning than they were actually at doing.
Right. Well, you can make the same accusation about everybody really since Tony Blair. I think Tony Blair was probably the last person who knew how to govern properly.
Yeah, well,
it seems to me.
It's a dangerous trend, isn't it? But she kind of worked hard. She focused on the ministerial boxes and on the meetings, not on the headlines.
Right.
And she really grasped the detail. And it was extraordinary. Papers come out of the box, and she clearly had been sort of nodding off because she was doing them in the small hours of the night, and the pen would slip. But then she'd go back to it. And so she really mastered what she wanted to do, and then she did it.
Right. And what was she like as a person? Because I think a lot of people remember her for her speeches and for her demeanour and for her little off-the-cuff remarks and press conferences and all of that. But what was she like to actually be around?
Well, she was much nicer than you might imagine. I mean, before I worked for her, I had the kind of, spitting image stereotype, basically a kind of male figure, really, a kind of hag in a grey man's suit, telling everybody what to do. I mean, she was, a strong person, a strident person. She could be aggressive if she felt under threat, and obviously she did from, some of her colleagues towards the end I was working for her. But actually, personally, she was really quite thoughtful. I went out on her visits in the UK with her, was by her side, and she was actually surprisingly good at listening. And she was, could be very kind. I went with her to a visit to the Mildmay Hospice, which was the, hospice which had AIDS a hospital which had AIDS patients in it. It was a sort of semi-private visit, and as your visitors will know, she was very against gay rights, and she brought in Section 28 to prevent the teaching about homosexuality. But we were shown into the rooms of these two dying men, and just the two of us, and she was just really kind to them, very motherly. Very grounded and actually very sweet. So I think, she was a different person close to, but I think throughout, whether you saw her close to or whether you saw her on television, she was, she was strong. And response to any crisis was to get on top of it, not to be kind of thrown sideways by it.
Right. Fascinating woman, and it must have been a fascinating job. Caroline, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Caroline Slocott there, former private secretary to Margaret Thatcher, who was actually in the room with her when she resigned as Prime Minister, which obviously was a very sad moment for her. Ian in Warrington says this, it's clear in my mind that Starmer believes that his sole purpose in life, the reason he was placed on this earth, is to pee people off, and he's doing a great job of it. Well, I mean, that's the only thing he could claim to be doing a great job of. It's one from Neil who says, I was in the hospital and was asked if I was pregnant. I found this extremely offensive as I'm a straight man married with children. My wife was the one that gave birth, yet me being offended this isn't catered for. I find it ridiculous. I don't even look feminine. Well, of course you don't, but that's not the point. They have to ask everybody. That's what they are told to do. Reg says the same. Morning, all. I'm in hospital today having a cataract surgery in Banbury. I'm a 59-year-old man with a bald head and a beard. And part of my pre-op questionnaire they wanted to know was if I was pregnant. You couldn't write it. Welcome to Britain. And one from Margaret in Edinburgh. Mike, in 1970, I was still at school. My dad, who worked as a spark in Portobello Power Station, brought home a recipe for spaghetti bolognese the first time he discovered garlic salt, and from there on, he put it in every meal. I mean, that was a luxury in the 70s, right? You would go, oh, look, what's this? Garlic salt? What do you do with that? Oh, you put it in your food. Really? Why? Well, it makes it taste continental. Does it? OK, then, I'll give it a go. And people thought that was really, really sort of exotic. God, it was easy then. It was so simple. Literally. You go in the pub, order a drink. They didn't ask you how many different types of gin you wanted. They only had one. That was, how many pints you want. We've only got one lager. We haven't got 7. There's nobody lining up behind each other like they do now. They were all just at the bar. jostling for position, waving their money around. Anyway, that's enough of that. Patty is sent us a voice note. Let's have it.
Morning, Mike. We're sick of being lied to by our politicians regarding the fact that men can have penises, women don't need their own safe spaces. They've lied to us about our children being raped for decades. They've hidden that from us. They lied to us about climate emergency. And the list just goes on. And the thing about Nigel Farage, whatever you think of him, he does speak the truth. And that is exactly what Reform voters want. We are sick and tired of lying, deceptive politicians. Great show. Patty from Causden.
Patty, well said. I think that's exactly the point. People don't care about policy anymore from the Tories or from Labour because they've been lied to so many times, they just don't believe them. It's as simple as that. Mike, surely we do not want Gen Z to fight for us. They just get out there and cry while spouting their nonsense dressed as llamas. Very possibly so. Coming up, we're going to talk about scams because an awful lot of young people are getting scammed as well. So they're not actually prepared for life yet. We'll find out what's going on. It's 9:43.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:46. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock, which is only about 10 minutes away, has to be said. Is Angela Rayner auditioning for a new Jaguar car ad, says Tony. And Gaz from Pontefract says, hey, Angela, those clothes Elton John gave you were meant to go to the charity shop. Come on. Do the right thing. Well, listen, you don't want to be accused of being a misogynist, do you, by having to go at a woman's clothes, for heaven's sake. Let me just point out to you that I have a go at everybody's clothes, so I'm absolutely an equal opportunity insulter, as I said. Let's talk to Nathan Paul Southerner, Operations Director at the Eyewitness Project, because it's come to our attention that almost half of children aged between 8 and 17 have been scammed online, and an awful lot of the scamming that's going on at the moment is coming from Southeast Asia, not least probably places like Cambodia, which Nathan knows an awful lot about. He covers corruption around the world. Nathan, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate.
Not at all. You're out there in Phnom Penh, I believe. What's been going on? Because there's been some stories that we've seen over the last few days and weeks about, you know, sort of almost farming levels of what you might call corruption and scamming. People being scammed online by people who are sort of more or less enslaved and taught how to do it.
Yeah, there's essentially been this massive new wave of a brand new crime type ever since the beginning of COVID. During COVID-19, we had the closure of casinos across the world, and we had people desperate to find work.
Right.
What happened was they repurposed casinos, and they turned them into places where you could do online scams based on online gambling. From there, they developed into every type of scam that you can imagine, to crypto investments, to sextortion, which is the kind of thing that's mostly affecting teenagers in the UK, which a lot of that study focuses on. Eventually, this got so big and so profitable that they began to use modern slaves, human trafficking victims from around some of the most poorest countries in the world to scam the richest countries in the world.
Right.
Now, countries like Cambodia have enormous cities that are just full of compounds that scam. The governments are completely behind it. In some cases like Cambodia, it could count up to 3 times the GDP of the entire country is
Wow.
what they make from scamming.
Incredible. And I suppose because it's all online, it's a lot easier to do. I mean, the story that I've got in front of me is slightly different to what you're telling us, but it's about younger people who spend an awful lot of time online, many of whom are as young as 8 years old, getting scammed for money. You know, so the parents kind of think they're, I don't know, watching TikTok or watching YouTube, but it turns out that they're getting deeper and deeper into places where people can get money off them.
Yeah, that's absolutely a massive concern about this. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to do for the last few years is change perceptions about scams.
Yeah.
It used to be that, oh, it's your old granny or your granddad that has no idea what's going on. They've got a call. Could it be British Gas or could it be someone actually getting you to give your bank details?
Right.
And now that's changed from, yes, you still have your older people, but you have the youngest, most tech-savvy generation we've ever had. You're going up to teenage years right now. Parents are not able to tell them how to be safe online when they have so much more knowledge about how the internet works than their parents ever could.
Yeah.
But it affects everyone in between as well. There is no one in the UK that doesn't know someone that has been scammed.
Right.
These operations are incredibly sophisticated, and there is just no one out with the reach of these organised crime groups.
Right.
The money they make is incredible, and the tech that they have is unbelievably sophisticated.
Right. And so do they manage to do all this and remove people's sort of life savings, if you like, without even ever having to speak to anyone because they can just do it online?
So a lot of the conversation is online, but it can be through messages, and then there can be calls. So
Right.
what we have is layers. So these scam centers will have maybe one person develops a relationship. That might be meeting someone on Facebook and developing a romantic relationship with them, or meeting on a dating app and doing something similar.
Right.
Then when they've kind of got them on the hook, a little bit interested in that person, then they're able to pass them to the next person in the stage.
Right.
And that next person will then start discussing either whether it's sextortion to
Yeah.
get them to send naked pictures, or the idea of crypto investments and making a lot of money.
Right.
And then at that point, they might do fake phone calls. So they all have models, maybe Russian, Kazakhstani, and Singaporean women who are also enslaved in these compounds. They hand the phone to them. They do video calls. You feel like you're talking to the same person you have been since the beginning.
Right.
But in actual fact, you've spoken to maybe 16 Indonesian men, 2 beautiful Kazakhstani models, and they have been working you in a chained process
Wow.
to extract all of your savings. And you never know which person you'll have spoke to.
Yeah, incredible. And I mean, in terms of social media's ability to stop it, because I assume a lot of this goes through social media in one way, shape or form, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. I mean, could they be better at stopping it?
Oh yeah, they're absolutely terrible, Mike. They are doing nowhere near enough to make people safe from scams and to make people safe from the human trafficking that fuels the scams. Facebook is making some efforts, but when you have groups like Telegram, there are open criminal channels on there that advertise how to sell people from one scam compound, how to do specific types of scams to people in the United Kingdom or to the US, and how you can transfer those money, that money process very easily with low risk and low fees throughout the world. So the social media companies are allowing this to stay up. It's this battle between freedom of speech and safety, but one aspect that's never brought into that is that this has become an enormous online criminal marketplace that openly advertises ways to scam people out of their life savings and ways to buy human beings to help do that.
Yeah, incredible stuff. What a story. We'll look into it some more, Nathan. We'll talk to you again, I'm sure. Nathan Paul Southern, there, Operations Director at the Eyewitness Project, keeping an eye on basically corruption around the world, and these kind of scam farms that have been set up in places like Cambodia and Kazakhstan, where people are basically contacting you, whether you're underage or not, doesn't matter. They're doing it to adults as well as they're doing it to children, and it's quite incredible. One from somebody who doesn't give a name. Picking up my grandson later from school, get a text off my son who says, can I turn up slightly later as he's on a school-led climate protest. He's 8. I protest, I despair, he goes. Blimey. Eddie in Dartford, I'm not sure what's funnier, Labour replacing the disgraced health minister who wished to pension the dead with some bozo who thinks it's OK to identify as a llama, or Mike Graham asking who is vetting these people. Somebody said great meeting on the Ferrari stand at Carfest last year. Eddie, hello, how are you? Didn't realise. Nice to see you. Many kids being scammed online. Who cares, says Mac. They shouldn't be online without parent supervision. In the first place, in fact, they shouldn't be online, full stop. Yeah, I think the problem is, Mac, that that's easier said than done. You know, there's been all sorts of stories that have come up about online harming, about online games and scams and tricks and pranks that people do, that kids get involved in. It really is awful what's going on out there. And it's not any longer, I don't think, possible just to say kids shouldn't be online, because they are. It's, you know, it's a necessity of life. In school they're online. You don't have books anymore. They do everything on computers. Anyway, it's 9:53. Julia will be here very shortly. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory.
Keir Starmer refers to people like me and you as far right because we challenge immigration, or we want prison to be harsh, or we want villains locked up. They see the world through that view. There's hardly any senior officers who are ex-armed forces anymore. There used to be about 50% of the senior officers. And so what you have is this liberal elite who believe in everything that you see on the net zero, mass immigration, liberal views on the punishment of criminals. They belong to that same club.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It's 9:57. Julie Hartley-Brewer is going to be here very, very shortly. Quick call from Dave before we do that on Gen Z. Dave, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very well, sir. What do you want to tell me?
Yeah, I'm surprised it's as high as it is that would fight for the country. I wouldn't fight for the country anymore.
Wouldn't you?
I certainly wouldn't if I've got Gen Z kids. I certainly wouldn't let them fight for the country. It's not their country anymore, Mike. It's been given away, as you know. What percentage of the current Labour government would you say are currently fighting for this country?
I don't think it's about them, though, is it? I mean, your country is your country, regardless of who's running it. You know, I liken them to football managers. You know, if you're a Manchester United supporter, you still support Manchester United, even if the current management isn't any good. Don't you?
Yeah, but you do, but you're not giving your life for Manchester United, are you? So in
well,
this
no,
case,
but I mean, I bang on about how awful this country is and the terrible state it's in all the time, but I would still fight for it.
Well,
but
I'm not sure I would now.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a problem. I'm not blaming you for saying that. I just think it's a problem. If people like you, Dave, don't want to fight for your own country, I think we're in a bad place. Listen, I've got to run. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here.
I would absolutely fight for my country.
Yeah,
you and I bang on about the state of our country because we know we are a great country with amazing people. We've done amazing things for the world over the centuries, and actually we know our country could be so much better.
Yes,
that's what we're trying to fight for.
And you also, I would fight for it for my children.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would expect them to do the same.
But young people who don't rate like our country, it's because they've been ideologically programmed